Welcome into TYT's The Conversation. I'm your host, Adrienne Lawrence, and today I am joined by Eliza Orland, Manhattan Public Defender and candidate for Manhattan District Attorney. Welcome in, Eliza.
I'm so happy to be here with you tonight.
I'm so glad to have you because right now you're a public defender, meaning that you represent people who are accused of crimes in New York City, Manhattan in particular. But you want to become the district attorney, meaning that you'd be the person who accuses people of committing crimes and prosecutes them. Why do you want to make this change?
I know, I ask myself that every day, but really it's how we're going to make the changes that we so desperately need to see. I have spent my entire career as a public defender here in Manhattan. I've represented over 3,000 people charged with crimes and really seen the cruel, unjust way our criminal legal system operates that's not keeping us safe, that's wasting taxpayer money, that's over prosecuting people for low-level offenses, and meanwhile not holding people accountable who commit serious crimes. And I know we can do better. And we're seeing these national conversations about criminal justice reform happen across the country. And I'm so excited that people have really rallied behind my candidacy to elect a public defender as the next Manhattan DA.
All right, and I understand you have a video that we can watch?
Yeah.
Excellent, let's check it out.
For the last 10 years, I've been a public defender here in Manhattan. I've represented over 3,000 New Yorkers, people who didn't have the money to pay for a lawyer. I fight for justice for them. My name's Eliza Orland, and I'm running for Manhattan District Attorney. Every day in court, I fight against a criminal legal system that's cruel and unjust, one that's rigged for the rich and powerful and against everyone else, a system that fails us, that devastates Black, brown, and low-income communities, that tears families apart, that hurts innocent victims, and that does not keep us safe. We can do better. We must. I know the system from the inside, so I know we can't change the system unless we change the DA. That's why I'm running to be your next Manhattan District Attorney. Join me in the fight.
Eliza, that was quite the compelling statements you made there. And also you can see your passion in there. And I know that you make the case that voters need to elect someone who's never been part of the prosecutorial industrial complex. What do you mean by that?
Well, for far too long, prosecutors have really perpetuated this system that is not broken, as some people would have you believe, but that's rigged. And it's rigged against the people that I've spent my career representing as a public defender, lower income folks, people of color, our Black and brown communities, our LGBTQIA communities, people with disabilities. And it's rigged in favor of those who are wealthy, well-connected, and powerful. And that's not how we're gonna keep our city safe or effectuate justice. We really need a DA who wants to think through what it would really mean to not just default to incarceration for every societal problem. As a public defender, I've represented people who were dealing with mental health issues, dealing with substance use disorder, experiencing homelessness or poverty, and putting those people in jail is not addressing the root causes of any of the things that they're dealing with. We need to be investing in communities, declining to prosecute low-level offenses, providing treatment and help for people who need it, and that's how we will keep our communities safe.
You also want to significantly downsize the scope of prosecution. So does that mean you're simply not going to prosecute people for crimes?
It does. And in fact, thankfully, there are prosecutors now getting elected who have been in office for long enough that these longitudinal studies exist, like Rachel Rollins in Suffolk County, Massachusetts, in Boston, who has declined to prosecute about 15 crimes. And these are low-level offenses, things like drug possession. And it turns out that when you decline to prosecute these offenses, it makes it less likely that a person will end up having future contact with the criminal legal system. And this is all borne out by these studies, by what's actually been happening for the last couple of years. And so when I decline to prosecute these low-level misdemeanor cases, in fact, it's going to reduce crime instead of what the media would sometimes have you believe, or prosecutors or police officers would have you believe, which is if we don't lock people up, we're not going to be able to keep our communities safe. Well, it's actually quite the opposite.
Yeah, I think there was something similar done in Baltimore last year that had some very strong results. And so I would love to see what you could do in terms of New York City. And recently, the current Manhattan DA, that's Cy Vance, he said he would seek to vacate 100 convictions that were obtained through the work of NYPD officer James Franco, who happened to be indicted for perjury and falsifying testimony. I know the Brooklyn DA did something similar, kind of in that move just the week before. Now, these are unprecedented moves, but I get a sense that we shouldn't necessarily be impressed.
Well, what I can tell you is, as a public defender, I have seen far too many times a police officer or a detective like Detective Franco walk into court, swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, say I do, and then lie under oath, whether it be to a judge, to a jury, to a grand jury, and not be held accountable for this. So Detective Franco being finally held accountable, these convictions being vacated, him being prosecuted, is a step in the right direction, but it's certainly not something to be heralded as the cure-all. He is emblematic of the problem that is so pervasive and exists across and throughout the system, and he's not a one-off or an anomaly.
Yeah, it seems like this is something that may be breeding within the system, and it definitely has to be weeded out. It also makes me wonder the lives that were ruined as a result of that kind of behavior and not addressing it or policing it. And so in terms of moving forward, when it comes to possibly having to prosecute people, are there any steps that you would take that would be different than kind of the current steps taken now?
Definitely. And, prosecutors for so long have been complicit in the continuing misconduct of the police, whether it be the brutality and harassment and assault that we've seen in the streets, or this falsifying of documents and false arrests and perjury. We need a district attorney who's going to stand up to the police, who's going to hold them accountable. I've laid out very detailed plans for a police accountability unit that actually holds the police accountable. But also there are so many other serious crimes being perpetrated in our city that the DA's office has really turned a blind eye to, those that are committed by those who are wealthy and powerful, corporations who are committing wage theft to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, people committing the slow violence of environmental crimes, that also disproportionately impact our low income and Black and brown communities, whether it be toxic mold or, air quality or other offenses that are not being really prosecuted by the Manhattan DA's office or investigated, because so much of that office's resources are going towards prosecuting low-level offenses.
Yeah, it sounds like you would shift the resources and make the change that really can have an impact on individuals' lives in a positive way. So I am definitely here for that. And so when it comes to kind of that competition out there that you're going up against as you run for the Manhattan DA spot, what separates you?
So I'm the only public defender running for Manhattan DA, and that makes me uniquely qualified in that I have more litigation and courtroom experience than anyone else in the race. I really have understood and seen the systematic ways that this criminal legal system has destroyed lives, has torn apart families, has not taken into account the human beings whose lives are at stake with every single prosecution, has just dehumanized people, has just thrown their lives away, has really perpetuated mass incarceration. And I understand what it would take to fix it. So not only do I have this authentic commitment because these are the issues that I've been fighting for my entire career, but I really have the know-how and understanding of all of the ways in which we really need to focus on reallocating resources, thinking about changing the system and the ways in which we address prosecution that uniquely qualifies me out of this entire field of candidates to be the next Manhattan District Attorney.
Now, some of our viewers may not necessarily know this, but you hit the national stage back in 2004 on a TV show. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Eliza?
Yep. So I've spent far more of my life in the courtroom, in the trenches, fighting on behalf of people. But I did appear on Survivor back when I was in college, and really was a huge fan of the show and loved how it tested your limits, physically and emotionally and psychologically, and really decided to apply as soon as I saw the first season. And my mom, of course, was like, "Of course, sweetheart, you can do anything." Now she tells people, "Be careful what you tell your kids because they believe you." And got on the show when I was 21 years old, and really did quite well, and really have enjoyed getting people involved in these issues that are so important because of the reach that I have, thanks to being on Survivor. So it's exciting to really get people engaged in local politics who maybe would not have thought about a DA race in Manhattan, but for the fact that someone who appeared on Survivor was running.
Thank you so much, Eliza. And to our viewers out there, Eliza Orlins is running in the June 22nd primary in New York City. Thanks so much for joining us, Eliza.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
We're very honest that we're progressives. We call the Young Turks home of progressives, and we support progressive candidates.
There has been this reemergence of political activism, especially among young people.
This weekend was the second Women's March, both across the US and across the world. So these people are not simply marching, they're not simply talking, they're also running for office. And when they do run, they're gonna make a difference.
Joe Crowley is congressman from New York. He's very powerful. Why? He raised a lot of money. But there's someone finally challenging him.
We need to have representation that advocates as fiercely for working class people as possible from this seat.
If candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez even get a little bit of media attention outside of what the Young Turks does, they have an excellent chance of winning.
She's gonna win. She's gonna win.
68% reporting.
The majority of Americans want Medicare for all. So I don't care what you and your corporate cronies want. What I care about is what the American people want.
We believe in total change. Everything runs on donor money. And that is what we will fight, and that is exactly why they don't like us.
We're having fun, it's election night!
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has defeated Joe Crowley.
Here we go again!
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Down goes Crowley! Down goes Crowley! Down goes Manafort! Down goes Cohen!
Women came out in record numbers in the primaries.
They said you'll be lucky to get one candidate. We now have 12 that have won their primaries.
Bezos and Amazon announcing that they are going to go to a 15-hour minimum wage.
We're making progress. Let's keep going.
Many of these women made history.
The biggest victories, all women of color. Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar, Sharice Davids and Deb Haaland.
And I want to go to Congress because I want to change those things.
I'm calling it. Jamal Bowman has won. Down goes Engel. Down goes Engel.
For a long time, we have not had progressives in power. It's going to be something to behold.
Welcome to Happy Hour, everybody. After a week of soul-crushing news, we break out the good stuff. Good news, good videos, good people, and, of course, drink good alcohol. That's the worst thing I've ever had.
This is the best show.
Full disclosure, we did do a shot right before the show began. It says,
let's look.
Flamingo.
Flamingo.
The reason you had trouble with that word is it's not a word.
Okay.
This is the one of everything.
I've got a rash. Could I just put it on that to see if it'll take it off?
What did you used to think this was?
Bull piss.
Drink it, swallow it, spit it. Oh, that's needed after a day like this. Cheers to Brett Ehrlich. Climax. Uranus smells like farts. Because of course it does. This is the worst sketch ever of a perp. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? They found the guy. This is Sophie's super happy dog story of the week.
This dog is so precious and deserves the world. I'm just not drinking that beer.
Here's my dog. This is Onyx.
Yeah, I would just say that he's exotic because he's not your traditional dog. Still 12 out of 10 because they're all good.
Well, if that made you happy, just wait till you see the best thing ever of the week. There is a woman who moves like a horse.
Why do I want to go home and like try this?
We're actually going to show you the running butthole challenge right now. What's happening? No, that's just wrong. Every way. And we'll see you next time.
Hey, Dave. As you can probably see, Skype froze. Frozen crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts. And it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
Welcome into TYT's The Conversation. I am your host, Adrienne Lawrence, and this time I am joined by former Brooklyn public defender, social justice activist, and founder of Zealous, a nonprofit that launches coordinated public defender campaigns and uplifts new media. Thanks so much for joining us, Scott.
Thanks for having me on. Great to see you.
Yes. So, Scott, can you tell us more about Zealous?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I was a public defender. I was a public defender for close to 10 years. We're at this really unique time right now where racial injustice and state violence is more visible, transparent, and widely acknowledged than ever before. But at the same time, the violence, waste, and cruelty inside of courts, jails, and prisons remains largely invisible. So as a public defender in Brooklyn, I saw every day how much state violence occurs every day inside jails and empty courtrooms, separated by jail bars and courtroom legalese. And I saw how all the things we allow our leaders to spend billions of dollars on every year, police, prosecutors, cages, they don't make us safer or healthier, but in fact, they do the opposite. And every day, public defenders and other frontline social justice workers witness the churning of thousands of irrational laws and practices. Yet this critical perspective and expertise, as well as the relationships we have and forge with the people we represent, have largely been overlooked in policy, media, and advocacy spaces. So I got to thinking, alongside folks in my office, how could we, as public defenders, speak out more, share our perspective and expertise about issues that no one was talking about ethically and effectively? How could we partner, and I mean like truly partner, with the people we represented in communities and local organizations to start pushing back against the narrative police and prosecutors enabled by an all too willing media we're putting out? And why weren't we yet? So after close to a decade of work kind of at the intersection of policy and practice, we decided to take these lessons learned national. So Zealous is this national initiative now. I'm doing it full time that supports, activates, and trains public defenders in partnership with community organizations, artists, and the communities and people that we all represent to harness media and technology, develop communication strategies, build true capacity and coalition, and leverage the expertise and perspective of frontline practitioners to transform legal systems. That's the goal, at least. That's what we're trying to do.
Well, it definitely sounds like a hell of an initiative. And also, it sounds like you're making some real change. And I understand that Zealous coordinates public defender policy campaigns, strategic projects, and partnerships in cutting edge new media advocacy. But can you tell us in concrete terms, what is Zealous really proud to have accomplished so far?
Yeah, so we haven't been around for long. I mean, we've only been around for a little bit over a year. When COVID struck, I decided to take this on full time and grow it into a full team. But so far, in just a little bit over a year, we've trained hundreds of public defenders and up and coming social justice champions in a variety of offices and law schools all over the country, in a range of skills they definitely don't ordinarily teach you in law school. We're using curriculum that we co-developed with leaders in a wide variety of disciplines, including predominantly organizers and people with direct experience. And we teach things like working effectively with community organizations, campaign development, using intentional humanizing language. So even though we're well-meaning, we're not going out there and further entrenching the status quo. Advocacy storytelling, engaging people as partners, the people that we represent, working with press, et cetera. And through this work, we support the development of story and narrative-driven campaigns. So our trainings are not based in hypotheticals. We actually are invited in to do trainings that center on issues that folks are working on and that are priority issues in those local jurisdictions. So from non-police response to mental health issues in Harris County, or ending fines and fees in Louisiana, decarceration in Chicago, in accountability in Prince George's County, Maryland. We're working with a range of jurisdictions with a range of partners and kind of following their lead. I guess the best way to explain it is just through a quick example of maybe I think our work in Prince George's County, Maryland. So it's really close to DC. And one of our primary efforts really has been trying to think outside the constraints of the typical legal boxes about how to amplify the voices of those with direct experience. So within months of the pandemic, when it was at its worst in Prince George's County, they were still sending hundreds of people to COVID-infested jail, unable to social distance, no PPE, outbreaks all over the place. You had to pay $4 to get medical treatment during COVID. Judges were issuing boilerplate denials. Public defenders were banging their heads against the wall. Civil Rights Corps, this extraordinary organization, filed a powerful motion with 60 sworn declarations from people inside brave enough to describe what they were going through. And the federal judge cast them aside as unhelpful, marginally relevant. And she complained that she couldn't cull the chaff from the wheat. Traditional legal avenues were not working. There was a court watch program of one. There's one volunteer. So they called us in, and we worked with public defenders alongside an amazing local organization run by two formerly incarcerated women, Kiana Johnson and Carmen Johnson, and Civil Rights Corps, and brought in a range of actors, actresses, Broadway stars, civil rights champions, activists, Black law school deans to read the words from these sworn declarations. We didn't have cell phone footage, but we had their words. And we launched this campaign called Gasping for Justice and went from one person, an audience of one, judges, to millions. 20,000 petition signatures calling on the state's attorney to take action. The county came to the negotiation table for the civil rights lawsuit. And that one volunteer in court watch went to hundreds. And most importantly, though, we helped strengthen that coalition between defenders and people with direct experience. And now they're fighting on all cylinders. We're there, kind of let go a little bit, and we're seeing them now fight together to keep virtual court access open. So we're in a range of jurisdictions, working on a range of issues, using a range of different interventions.
Yeah, for real. That sounds so incredibly impactful and game-changing. That's pretty remarkable, Scott. Also, there's been a lot of conversation and talk about having these nonprofit organizations that are looking to make change in spaces that impact primarily people of color. And I know it sounds like you are 100% in and invested in making this change, but as a white man, I'm sure you've heard the whole white savior narrative. What would you say to those people?
Well, I mean, I only can speak for myself. Fortunately, those who know me and work with me know why I do this work, and it's definitely not for me. I can't change the fact that I'm a white man in the same way that I can't change the extent of my daily outrage over how cruel, irrational, racist, unhealthy, brutal, and costly the system is, and how much it needs change, wholesale, full transformation. So I've used my privilege of voice, of freedom, of access to call out the injustice I know and that I saw firsthand on repeat every day as a public defender. But I'm also working each and every day, and I think we all have to better understand my privilege, to better understand whiteness, and how even the most well-intended things I say, and do can inadvertently harm others. And it's something we talk about a lot actually during our trainings with defenders, knowing when, and it's more often than not, to sit down. Know when you're not the messenger. We don't want to replicate the same kind of power dynamics that we see in court where we're the ones always doing the talking. And more than ever, actually, through our work at Zealous, we're far more behind the scenes, thinking constantly about how to uplift others as an ally, accomplice, and co-conspirator. And so it's a challenging space, but it's an honor to have the opportunity to grow and contribute to the movement at the same time.
Yeah, that makes me really happy to hear, because it is a powerful position, and the access and the privilege that you have, and to see you invest it and to give back in it the way that you do, that is so cool. And I wish more people were invested like that. And so I know you've already talked about the incredible things that Zealous has done, which again sounds incredibly remarkable. I want to know, are there any things that are kind of on the docket that people can look out for?
Yeah, so more trainings in additional jurisdictions. We're building out our law school curriculum. We're authoring a toolkit for jailhouse lawyers, so public defenders on the inside, to add new tools to their arsenal. And we're doing that in partnership with the Jailhouse Lawyers Initiative and at NYU Law School. It's actually run by formerly incarcerated people. Campaigns, we're soon to launch 2 new campaigns built on firsthand accounts in partnership with local activists and advocates and defenders who are in direct communication with folks who are incarcerated. One project in Michigan built on over 100 letters from people in solitary confinement as part of the effort to abolish the torture in Michigan. The other campaign is built off about the same number of audio recordings from phone calls from people on the inside who wanted their voices to be heard. That's in Texas, and that's going to be on pretrial incarceration. And we're working in Chicago as well. They just passed the Pretrial Fairness Act. There's really remarkable legislation that really overhauls the pretrial justice practice in all of Illinois, but also ends cash bail. And unfortunately, when we make these strides forward, so when we pass cash bail or when a more forward-thinking prosecutor comes into power, and when the pro-carceral forces feel threatened, they use the same tactics that got us into this mess of mass incarceration, fear, taking on salacious and sensationalist cases to try to take back what they lost. And so we're seeing that already in Chicago. So we're trying to work with local advocates, defenders, and people with direct experience to try to not just defend and be reactive, but be proactive about how to respond to violence and what our responses to it should be. And that's not, it turns out, locking more people up. That only makes the situation worse.
Thank you so much, Scott Hettinger. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Cenk Uygur and Hank Kasparian with you guys. It's going to be a hell of a show. We have a couple stories on here that are just fantastic. That's fantastic. Ted Cruz story, the Missouri story, where they're like, democracy, not so much. Apple's getting sued. Is it a monopoly? People want to know. They gotta know, right? There's slander websites. Oh, there's such drams about them. Okay, I mean it's terrible. But then the drams, the twist in that story. What are you gonna do? Not stay around for the twist? What are you gonna do? Not like and share this video? Don't be ridiculous. Of course you're gonna do that, and we love you for it. But I'm gonna tell you one last thing. Tonight, finally, live Old School's back. Oh no, wait a minute. Does that mean you guys can participate? It does.
Who are you hosting with?
I'm hosting with Mark Thompson tonight.
Nice, okay.
The legend, Mark Thompson, nicest man in America. All right, so you guys get to interact with us tonight at 10 o'clock Eastern. So there's the episode that's available to everybody, free at 10 o'clock, that's 45 minutes. There's a bonus episode, oh no, of Old School, another 45 minutes. That's just for the members. Did I say tyt.com/join? I didn't, but the graphic did, and I just did as well. That's how we do a plug. And finally, tonight, our first ever bonus episode of the Young Turks.
Bonus, everyone loves bonuses. Who doesn't love a bonus?
Here's who likes bonuses, our members, okay, because they're getting them, tyt.com/join. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can hit the join button below. But for the bonus episode of the Young Turks, you gotta be at the essentials level. For the bonus episodes of all the other shows, you gotta be at the premium level. I'm just keeping it real, that's just the reality of it. You could always do it through our website. All right, much love, lots of shows, lots of stories, go.
All right, I'm gonna start off with the story that I wish everyone was paying more attention to, and that's of course the housing market and the trends that we're starting to see. Yes, of course, that's right. So let's do it. Let's talk about the latest. So, as US home prices continue to surge, many are asking, are we in the middle of a housing bubble? And depending on who you're talking to, you'll hear all sorts of answers. Yes, we are. No, we're not. But one thing that is for sure is that right now, what we're experiencing in the housing market is not sustainable. It's certainly not sustainable, and there are incredibly wealthy people taking advantage of the situation and pricing ordinary Americans out of the market. Now, new data from Redfin shows that the median home price in April rose 20% to $347,500 compared with just a year ago. And the average home spent just 20 days on the market before selling. If you're in the market to buy a home, you've probably experienced bidding wars. You've probably even offered above asking price and still got outbid. Now, when you hear the reasons for why this is happening in the housing market, much of the examples you get have to do with the coronavirus pandemic. Low mortgage rates, that's one of the other things that you'll hear, which is true. It means that the cost of borrowing it costs less to do so. It's easier to qualify for a bigger loan for a house. So some are arguing that the low mortgage rates are convincing people to take out loans and buy homes. There's a lack of homes available. So since the lack of inventory is an issue, that drives up the price because of the high demand. Then there is also teleworking as a result of the pandemic. More and more people are looking to buy homes for more space so they can work from home. And then there's also a delay in new home construction as a result of the pandemic. But that is not the full robust picture. And I think it's important to talk about why we're seeing what we're seeing in the housing market. And just to give you a sense of where we were at prior to the pandemic, home prices rose 12% year over year in February, the fastest rate since 1996, and that's according to the most recent reading from the closely watched S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller Home Price Index. So Cenk, before I actually tell people what's really going on, why don't you jump in?
I was mainly mumbling, although probably bumbling as well, under my breath, going, preach it, teach it. Okay, so look, good news, bad news. Good news, my parents are selling their home soon. Okay, so I thought, oh, the marketing housing bubble where they get more. Good, okay, so if you're selling a home, you're feeling pretty good about it, right? But as the local news guys like to do in their intonation, my parents will be selling their home, but they'll also be buying a home. So that means, well, that's good news, but then that's bad news. So look, all the things that Anna outlined in terms of where the market is. Well, people want to buy more homes because they don't want to be packed in the cities, and they haven't done a lot of construction because of coronavirus, and there's a lot of demand and not a lot of supply. That's all very normal. Okay, so that's a normal demand and supply, and if that's why the market is moving up and there's nothing else, then that makes sense. That it's just a normal story. But there's more. Hence, we go back to teach it.
So this is what frustrates me about the conversations revolving around the housing market and the lack of affordable housing. And clearly what we're talking about here is different from renting, although this has an impact on renting as well, which we'll get to in just a second. But to simply say that this is a problem due to a lack of construction doesn't give you a full picture of what's going on. Because if you live in a city, chances are you've noticed quite a bit of construction. The only problem is construction for new housing typically immediately gets sold to private equity firms like Blackstone, which have no interest in flipping houses. They don't even do that, which that kind of speculative nonsense also unfortunately puts home buyers at a disadvantage. But what they do is they invest in entire neighborhoods of newly built homes, single family residential homes, and then they put those homes back on the market as rentals and essentially serve as the country's largest slumlords. That's one of the issues. The other issue that you're likely to come across is a home has been sold in your neighborhood and there's no one living in it, and it's because the person who bought that home doesn't even live in the United States. We're talking about foreign investors, in some cases even foreign private equity firms who are looking for a place to store their money, and they see US real estate as a safe haven. And there should be laws preventing that from happening when we keep hearing from our politicians over and over again that there's a lack of supply. Well, if there's a lack of supply for Americans, then why are we allowing foreign investors who have no interest in even living here to invest in US real estate? The other thing I wanted to bring up is a counter to the talking point that I hear from the naysayers, the individuals who claim that we are not currently in any type of real estate bubble because Dodd-Frank, the legislation that passed during the Obama administration, regulated the banking industry to ensure that they would not engage in the predatory lending that led to the 2008 economic collapse. Now, when it comes to big banks, Dodd-Frank certainly applies, which is why big banks have tightened up their mortgage standards. It's much more difficult to get qualified for a mortgage, pre-qualified and what have you. However, Dodd-Frank did not apply to what's referred to as non-bank lenders. And beginning in 2016, non-bank lenders ended up lending about 50% of the outstanding mortgages. And that's relevant because, again, non-bank lenders do not have to abide by the same regulations that the big banks do. And that's a problem because they are over-leveraged themselves, and they also engage in what's known as mortgage-backed securities, and those securities get traded in the stock market. And then what happens if those toxic mortgages end up defaulting? Well, then if you're invested in your 401k or your retirement account with these mortgage-backed securities and the economy collapses, well, then you're gonna be hurt as well. Just a few graphics, Cenk, just to kind of really understand what this is. Non-bank lenders are more likely to lend money to borrowers who might be rejected by traditional banks. For example, a borrower with a low credit score or someone hoping to purchase a home that will require a lot of renovation is more likely to be approved by a non-bank lender. Non-bank lenders can't take funds from customer deposits because they're not banks, remember? So to make the mortgage loans, as they don't offer checkings or savings accounts, instead they borrow the money on a line of credit and sell mortgages to investors. According to the Brookings Institution, the danger is that non-bank lenders depend on short-term credit to finance their loans. Markets usually tighten in times of financial crisis. Now, as we all know, coronavirus has brought forth a giant financial crisis for tens of millions of Americans, but thanks to the federal government issuing a moratorium on evictions and foreclosures, people haven't been pushed out of their homes. The question is, what happens when that moratorium is lifted? And no one has really answered that question, including the federal government.
Okay, so Professor Casper handled most of the material here. I'm just a TA, okay? So let me add some color to this. So first off, on the private equity part, This is left out of most of the articles written about the housing market. They usually cover the first part of what we told you, and then leave out the parts that affect the financial industry and might be driving a big part of this movement. So I just want you to understand supply and demand. So before we talked about the normal market forces, but when the big guys on Wall Street buy a whole heap of homes, which they have, and if you remember from a previous show, we told you that after the 2008 crash, they swooped in because they foreclosed on those homes. And so they knew they were getting them at really cheap rates. They knew the market would go back up. And the kicker is they knew that you wouldn't have the money anymore for the down payment to buy those homes back. Hence, you would have to rent from them. So they would make money on the rent and they would get the equity of the house that normally you would get. So, I mean, give them credit in a sense. That's a savvy financial move. It's done because, of course, the government financed it. They would give them giant subsidies and bailouts, etc. I could be savvy too if the government just handed me all that money and told me to go take your houses, right? So, but there's a second problem with that, which is happening now, which is because they bought so many homes, there is higher demand for that in the housing market, which drives up prices. Because you're now not just competing with Bob and Sally who also want to move into the neighborhood, you're competing with Wall Street who's buying those homes, right? But it also creates lower supply. Since they're renting out the homes, well, then they're not selling them. So all those homes that are being rented out by Wall Street now taken off the market. Well, when you have lower supply and higher demand, the prices are gonna skyrocket up. And that's exactly what's happening here. And then when you combine that with the coronavirus actual market forces, you're getting monster prices.
Yes.
And so that makes your chance of being able to buy a home and build that equity so that you don't have to rent the rest of your life. And you could actually have something that creates wealth for your family. Well, those chances are diminished and nearly gone now.
Exactly, and so what also ends up happening, and I can't emphasize how damaging this is, when you have these private equity firms like Blackstone taking all of these single family homes and turning them into rentals, you have this massive corporation serving as the landlord. And there have been many complaints on how they basically take care of these properties, how they treat their own tenants. During the coronavirus pandemic, even with the federal government implementing a moratorium on evictions, they don't care. They've been evicting tenants left and right. And so it's obviously incredibly negative for renters, but it's terrible for people who are just ordinary Americans looking to live the American dream, looking to build their wealth. And to be honest, owning a home or buying a home was really the only way left for ordinary Americans to build wealth. And Wall Street has taken those opportunities away. And the federal government isn't even having a conversation about what to do to prevent this from happening. And again, it is true that there needs to be construction of new housing because there's a lack of inventory. However, we can't put the cart ahead of the horse. We need to ensure that there's regulation to prevent private equity firms from snatching up all of the new construction and turning them into rentals. One other thing I wanted to mention is that if you do find yourself lucky or fortunate enough to be able to outbid a private equity firm or an all-cash buyer, usually those all-cash buyers are part of Wall Street, well, what you've had to do in order to get that offer approved is incredibly risky. As The Hill reports, offers well above asking price are commonplace, and those unable to outbid competitors have upped the ante by waiving inspection requirements and restructuring offers with better immediate incentives for sellers. So that's not a good sign. That means that people are willing to do away with contingencies, which ensure that the home goes through the proper inspection. They might find that the home has major foundational problems, and they've just paid $100,000, $200,000 over asking price in some of these bigger markets.
Yeah, so I want to give the last word to our members because we do the show together with you guys. So Spice Boy Wannabe explained they're buying a house, they're selling a house, and the market is super hot. And so you guys are seeing it in your own lives. In fact, they said that before they even listed their house, already realtors had reached out to them. I don't know how they found out and started talking about getting them good offers, right? So it is, and look, so if you're a homeowner, And this happens in gentrification too. There is that silver lining, which is that you're gonna get a much better price if you sell now. Where you're gonna move, that's a different question, because you also have to buy, in which case you're gonna get screwed. But remember, there are two different problems here. One is the housing prices and getting priced out of the market. But the second price is the bubble. The second problem is the bubble and the crash that might come with it. So Anxiety Dragon wrote in, strange how we keep repeating the same things that caused the crash of 08. Repetition while expecting different results is the definition of insanity. Unfortunately, we live in insane times. So guys, the key there is what we're gonna look out for going forward is, are the banks doing the same things they did in 2008? So as I've explained 1,000 times on the show, the housing bubble was the trigger, but the gun was the derivatives. Those are the bets that they make on those homes, package of homes, right? And the package of homes might be worth a ton of money, but then they would bet 10 or 100 times that amount of money, and the bets are what triggered the domino effect for the crash. So have they started to redo those bets, the derivatives, the CDOs, and all those different packages? And the second problem was doing things that are off book. Because the banks would report, oh, no, we're not over leveraged. We're doing 4 to 1, 8 to 1, 6 to 1, whatever it was. Meanwhile, off the books, they were doing 100 to 1 leverage. So if you bet $1 and you lose $1, it's not that big a deal. But if you bet $1, it turns into $100 loss, dominoes, and the whole world is screwed, right? And so if they rebuild that casino or have already rebuilt it, then
Yes, the correct answer or the correct question to ask, and I wish we could find a way to get the answer, is, are these private equity firms over leveraged? Because really all it would take is any type of financial obstacle, economic obstacle for ordinary Americans that are renting their properties for them to default on their own loans. You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
And we don't know the answer to that yet. But what we do know is that what we're experiencing in the housing market is not in any way sustainable and is causing a lot of pain and suffering for ordinary Americans who have done everything right. And they just cannot outbid private equity firms who end up being all cash buyers.
Yeah, and those non-bank lenders could be the first dominoes to go. So be careful and pay attention to what Anna said about those guys, because they're in a much more precarious spot. If the crisis begins, they're the first dominoes to fall. And then when giant financial institutions cannot pay each other, that's what creates the dominoes, crashes the market, and then crashes the economy and screws us all.
When we come back from the break, we're gonna switch gears a little bit and talk about conservatives who claim that they're worried about woke culture when they engage in woke culture of their own. We've got that and more for you when we come back.
Hey guys, we're back during the break here. I want to share 1,000 things with you guys. Don't take away Spice Boy Wannabe's comment. I wanted to read the whole thing. Okay, so all right, that's a note to whoever's doing the comments at TYT. If you can, bring back Spice Boy's comment, because the whole thing was illuminating. But I want to give a shout out to all these new members that just signed up on YouTube. Rosemary Imbroniev, Richard Gaston. I watch too many Disney movies now. Gaston. Anyway, Sing is King, indeed. Good to have you with us, King. Christian Sans Paris, Mikhail Holloway, Athena Onken. Look at these wonderfully international names, said Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasparian. So love having you guys with us. Looking forward to all of you guys getting the bonus episodes. By the way, you could upgrade too. You might not even realize on YouTube that when you sign up, the default is the $1.99 level, and we love you for that, and you're still a member and you get a badge, etc. But basically we lose money at that level. So if you go to the higher levels, you help support the show even more, let's put it that way, and you get these bonus episodes. So thank you guys, we love you. Now, Michael Goldman asked a really good question on YouTube Super Chat about TYT. He said, I haven't heard anything lately about TYT's Progressive Pledge or the Media Amplify campaign. Are there any plans to renew those efforts? So Michael, you're awesome for tracking that and for asking that question. So on the Amplify program, it was mixed, but there was one super tangible result from it. I say mixed because you guys bought a lot of Young Turks membership for people in the media, and we sent it to them, and over again, we told them just open it and use it, right? Because we're trying to make sure that your money was well spent, etc. And besides, you guys all know it also helped the show, and we were clear about that. And a lot of them, didn't open it, and that frustrated us. But a lot of them did, and I believe that's how we got on Cuomo's show, because we know they opened it. Right? And then we wound up starting to go on Cuomo's show more and more and more. And during one of these bonus episodes, I could tell you about the details of how much of a difference that makes. So you guys were awesome. So at the end of the day, I would say mission accomplished on that one. But I get frustrated when like I want all of your money to go to something great, right? And a win-win. So when some didn't open it, that would frustrate me. So, but that was a great campaign overall. Now, secondly, and it wasn't just about us getting on. We got to spread the progressive message on during the campaigns. So that's why you guys rock, okay? On the Progressive Pledge, we were just having a conversation about it like 3-4 days ago. Like we had the conversation back in the day, do you take Elizabeth Warren off because she was kind of wavered on Medicare for all? Are we close? Oh yeah, I'm almost out of time, damn it. We thought about taking Marianne Williamson off for the same reason. Now, $15 minimum wage, they're not really fighting for it. I gotta tell you more in the bonus episodes. Anyway, great question, we'll be back. Back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, and you as well. I know Bill Maher, not a big fan of Twitch, but we are. Is Bill's thing? Is that in the bonus episode?
It's in the bonus episode.
Not the post game, it's
the bonus episode.
We'll talk about that in the bonus episode too. Anyway, so we'll get to that. But on our Twitch channel, we have this awesome community watching right now. Daisy Dragon gave 500 bits, and Obi Mom gave 500 bits. Quote, and they gave this quote, nice bits for the new intro, okay? So thank you for noticing that we had a new intro today. There's a lot of new things today. New intro, bonus episodes for this, new old school, it's live. We got a bonus episode for that. TYT.com/join, should you do that? I guess. Okay, hit the join button below on YouTube, yeah. Okay, all right, Casper.
Man, I feel like my housekeeping skills or whatever are like on full display today with my wrinkly shirt. I feel really bad, except I don't. But like, I'm sorry. I keep looking at myself in the monitor, and I'm like, man, I am a mess today. But not as bad as this guy. Look at him. All right, well, let's talk about Ted Cruz. In a new opinion piece for the Wall Street Journal, Senator Ted Cruz pretended as though he wants to hold corporations accountable. But it's not due to their mistreatment of workers or the fact that they tend to severely underpay the very people who make revenue for them. It's because he's worried about woke culture and how corporations are engaging in it. It's titled, "Your Woke Money is No Good Here," where Ted Cruz pretends as if he's not gonna take corporate PAC money. He argues that corporations have taken advantage of Republicans for too long. I won't take their PAC dollars anymore, says Cruz. So first off, let's just acknowledge and get out of the way the fact that we don't believe him. I personally don't believe him. I think that in one way or the other, he will take money from corporations because otherwise, how is he gonna do what he does? This is Ted Cruz's bread and butter, and the fact that he's pretending like he's not gonna take corporate donations is ridiculous. But moving aside, or moving to the other part that I wanted to bring up, he angrily writes about how these corporations are speaking out against Georgia's voter suppression law. And he believes that that qualifies as engaging in woke culture. Now, to be clear, I do think that the Democratic Party has a problem with quote unquote wokeness. And I'll get to that in a minute. And I want people to understand that it's actually a very nuanced issue that is hurting the Democratic Party when it comes to local elections, when it comes to federal elections, and we'll discuss it. But Cruz argues that had these watch me woke it up CEOs actually read the bill, instead of parroting the radical left's talking points, they'd have discovered they have no idea what they were talking about. A clutch of businesses or business leaders tried to win woke Twitter points and clown themselves instead. Now, obviously none of this is true. Corporations, after being pressured to speak out, actually did say that the voter suppression law in Georgia is a problem, and it is a problem. The voter suppression law specifically expands voting in areas that are typically voting in favor of Republican candidates. But when it comes to the more urban areas where you see a larger percentage of the African American vote, they've actually limited voting, including limiting the number of mail-in or drop boxes for mail-in voting. Now, he also says this is the point in the drama when Republicans usually shrug their shoulders, call these companies job creators, and start to cut their taxes. Not this time. This time, he argues, we won't look the other way on Coca-Cola's $12 billion in back taxes owed. This time, when Major League Baseball lobbies to preserve its multi-million-dollar antitrust exception, we'll say no thank you. This time, when Boeing asks for billions in corporate welfare, we'll simply let the Export-Import Bank expire. So I really want to emphasize that what gets these Republican lawmakers upset is when corporations, and it's rare, actually speak out against the Republicans' bad behavior. And to be sure, in Georgia, Republicans have engaged in bad behavior because they are trying to rig their elections to their advantage after that state flipped from red to blue and voted for Biden as president in the last general election. But they don't care about how workers are treated. They don't care about inequality in America. Those are things that they don't care about at all. They never have, they never will. And so I don't want anyone to be tricked into thinking that Republican lawmakers are looking out for you and trying to hold corporations accountable. That's not what this is about. They're trying to, in my opinion, in a weak way, retaliate against corporations for honestly doing nothing more than paying lip service to people who are outraged justifiably over Georgia's suppression law.
Okay, this is actually one of the most important stories we'll do because it has two massive parts of it, okay? One is the admission by Republicans like Ted Cruz. Marco Rubio wrote a very similar op-ed in the USA Today. And Mitch McConnell alluded to this in a different form a couple of weeks ago on the filibuster fight. Their admission that, yeah, we used to do whatever corporations wanted, but nothing that our voters wanted. Yeah. But now we might not do that anymore. It's amazing. It's amazing that, well, we used to let you off on your taxes to the tune of $12 billion because you gave us campaign donations. But well, now we might not do that, huh? Well, why'd you do that in the first place if it was wrong? That's unbelievable.
It's amazing.
He's just admitting it. One, because he thinks there's no real journalists in the country. We've been doing this corruption for decades and no reporter ever talks about it. They make it seem like, oh, campaign contributions, they're perfectly normal. No, they're bribes, they're legalized bribes. And here's Rubio, Cruz, and the rest going, well, oh yeah? We might not take your bribes anymore, and then you'll see. Yeah, that'd be great, that'd be great. So thank you for the admission. So will anybody in the press change? Of course not. I want to come back to that in a second because it's so important. The second part that is arguably as important is the Republican and Democratic parties are beginning to flip on corporations. And that's a giant deal, okay? That's good news and bad news. Mm-hmm. The bad news is Democrats are becoming the more pro-corporate party.
Yep.
Now, the good news is the reason corporations are switching their allegiance more to the Democratic Party is because the Democratic Party is more stable and corporations need stability. They're already on top. They don't want anything to change. So when a candidate says nothing will fundamentally change, they're like, yes, that's the guy. That's Biden, okay? when you have the Republicans going, I don't know, we'll do anything, man. So what? Well, maybe we'll nuke a hurricane. Maybe we'll inject ourselves with bleach. Maybe we'll let the racists take over. Maybe we'll go to fascism instead of democracy. Corporations are like, no, that is not the kind of instability we like. That threatens our existence, our revenue, etc. The second reason why corporations are going to Democrats is because progressives won the culture war. So now, what is the implication of that? Well, companies don't want to anger African Americans and Latinos and young people and LGBTQ folks, etc. Why? Because they're customers. And now there's a lot of us. And since we won the culture wars, in essence, now companies are saying, okay, before we couldn't make up our minds. Should cops shoot black people that are innocent or shouldn't they? I don't know. Should gay people have the same rights as straight people? I don't know. I'm neutral. And that was called brand safe. I'm brand safe because I'm not alienating Democrats or Republicans. Now there's so many customers on our side that they're going, oh, us being neutral to black people being murdered is not brand safe. Us being neutral to gay people being discriminated against and not having equal rights is not brand safe. If I want to sell more Coke and I want to sell more jeans and burgers, I've got to go towards where the customers are and the clients are. And so we won the country, we won the idea wars, and the Republicans are furious about it. And that is why they constantly talk about Dr. Seuss and woke culture, etc. Because that's slipping away from them. And hence, their corporate money is also slipping away from them. So this is Ted Cruz as the corporations are withdrawing their money from him going, oh, I didn't want it anyway. Okay, so I want to come back to that and what it means, because that's also a trick.
So I have a slightly different take. I don't believe that corporate money will stop flowing to the Republican Party. I believe that corporate money will continue to flow to the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. I do want to touch on a point that you made that I think is accurate regarding the Democratic Party now turning into the party that's more protective over corporate interests. And that actually does have something to do with what I've personally noticed with woke culture. Woke culture is a problem. And it's a problem when the Democratic Party specifically engages in that in lieu of policy that actually fundamentally improves the lives of the very people that they claim to be concerned about. So the incredibly superficial, shallow nonsense coming from the Democratic Party these days, where all they do is engage in the culture war by paying lip service to there are genuine problems, right? They'll talk about Black Lives Matter, they'll paint Black Lives Matter in front of Trump Tower in New York, but that's where it stops, that's where it ends. They don't go further than that. They don't actually champion policy that fundamentally improves the lives of the very people they're pretending to care about. And yes, I'm using the word pretend because much like the GOP, which dives into the culture war in order to deflect and avoid talking about economic policies that improve people's lives, Democrats do the same thing. They've got their own flavor and we need to be real about it. So they not only do that, they provide an opportunity for GOP lawmakers to attack them, sometimes attack them legitimately when they decide that they just want to go around, doing the PC finger wagging as opposed to doing things that again would fundamentally improve the lives of the people that they claim to care about, right? So that's my take on woke culture. I know that people get real uncomfortable with it because it's easy to pass it off as, oh, she just doesn't care about these disenfranchised groups of people. No, I do. I'm just sick of Democrats pretending like they care. They don't pass policies that improve people's lives. They don't fight for policies that improve people's lives. Instead, they spend all day on Twitter tweeting about what they would like to do to protect people or what they would like to do to make people's lives better. Well, then go out there and do it. I don't want to hear your tweets about cisgender this or the right wording to use for that. Like, no, I'm not interested. Do your jobs. I'm tired of the nonsense like posturing and theater on social media.
Yeah, so on that note, look, part of the identity politics that Democrats play, and yes, we're the most honest news show in America. We tell you exactly what's wrong with both the Republican and Democratic parties. The identity politics they play is, hey, I have a black person, I have a LGBTQ person, I have, you name it, a Muslim person, etc. I've got all my identities covered. And they're all telling you that corporations are awesome. Yeah, that doesn't do it. Who cares? I don't care that you found 7 people to use as fronts, right? Fox News does that. That's the oldest trick in the book. If those people then fought for police reform and actually got police reform, then I love it. Then I'm all here for woke culture, right? But they don't. They never do anything about police reform. Today, right now, Biden's in charge. The Democrats have the House and the Senate. What are they doing about police reform? Nothing, right? Show me increasing people's wages. I mean, the bare minimum is $15 minimum wage. Nothing. Show me something about healthcare. Not only is Biden not doing Medicare for all, he was supposed to do public option and lower the eligibility for Medicare. He dropped it. He didn't even mention in his address to Congress. So the reason we're mad about the so-called woke culture of the Democrats is not because it's wrong to represent black people and Latinos and all these other groups. It's because we want you to actually represent them instead of pretending to represent them and putting a good face on it, and then tricking everybody into voting for you and then doing nothing.
The fight for a minimum wage hike to $15 an hour is actually a perfect example, because when you look at the demographic that's overrepresented in the minimum wage jobs, it's women of color. It's women of color. So the Democratic Party will claim that they care about equality for women. Oh, there's a wage gap, there's a wage gap. They'll claim that they care about ensuring that there's actual equality, earning power for black people, for Latinos, for brown people. But then when push comes to shove, when they have the opportunity to implement the very policies that would significantly improve these people's lives, they back out. They go on Twitter and talk about how they need to do it, but then they don't do it. And so no cookies for you. You don't get cookies by talking about how you know what you need to do to improve people's lives. You only get the cookies when you actually do it, and they haven't done it.
Yeah, and it's all a trick, guys. I mean, look, Reverend William Barber is just a moral giant in this country. He's out in North Carolina, he's a wonderful preacher, and he has access to politicians, etc. And the minute Biden got into office, he did what everybody promised to do. He held him accountable. He said, you said $15 minimum wage, you're not doing it. Kamala Harris, I love you. And they talk, but you said you do $15 minimum wage and you have the power to do that. You have the power to overrule the parliamentarian and you're not doing it. See, that's what a person who's a moral leader does, who actually cares about the community. People who don't actually care put out other folks that look like the people that they care about or claim to care about, and they say, good enough, I'm not actually doing the substance. All right, but I've got to tell you the other part of it as quickly as I can. So when Ted Cruz says he's not taking the corporate PAC money, that's a good development. Look, the #1 litmus test we had at Just Democrats was not taking the corporate PAC money, and it made a giant difference. Now, understand though, that's the beginning, that's not the end. So how do they get around that rule? And Democrats do this a lot too, not the Just Democrats, but other corporate Democrats. They'll say, I'm not taking corporate PAC money anymore. And by the way, the people who did the Kamala Harris did this big time, Cory Booker did it, etc. right? Then they'll go and take tons of money from corporate executives. So that's a runaround. The second thing they'll do is they'll go to dark money PACs.
Boom.
And you can't tell if Koch or Chamber of Commerce, etc. put the money in.
Yes.
They go, I don't take the corporate PAC money, but I take the dark money. Nah, that's the same thing, okay? And that's an even bigger problem than the corporate executives. And then finally, there's the individuals. The Sheldon Adelsons who used to give $100 million at a time, the Kochs, the Mercers, etc. And I want to give you one quote from the Washington Post about that because it ties it all the way back to Ted Cruz. So the Mercers are Rebecca Mercer and Robert Mercer, and Rebecca Mercer, the dad in the Mercer family, is the one that made his money on Wall Street. So, and his daughter Rebecca also helps drive the donations. They gave over $13 million to Ted Cruz in the 2016 elections, okay, in the primaries. And now I want to tell you the rest of the story from the Washington Post. After giving $13.5 million to a super PAC that backed Cruz in the primaries, billionaire hedge fund executive Robert Mercer and his middle daughter Rebecca remade the group into an anti-Hillary Clinton vehicle and urged other conservatives to rally around Trump. They even publicly castigated Cruz after he declined to endorse his former rival at the Republican convention. In recent weeks, the Mercers played a role behind the scenes encouraging a détente. This is back in 2016. Efforts that carried weight because the family is highly regarded by both camps, according to a person familiar with the situation. So Ted Cruz says, I'm not taking corporate PAC money anymore. Meanwhile, a hedge fund executive is giving him $13.5 million at a time. And so Ted Cruz, who yelled at Trump famously when Trump called his wife ugly, said, "Oh, I'm not gonna let him get away with it." And at the convention, he didn't endorse Trump. These same Mercers slammed the door in his face, literally, at that convention when he went up after his speech. And then Ted Cruz, very famously, had that sad Ted picture where he was phone banking for Donald Trump. There it is. Now, why did he go from just a couple of months earlier saying he will not endorse Trump to begging people to vote for Trump? Because the Mercers said, no more money for you. And he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry." I don't know if he brought his wife in so the Mercers could call her ugly too. I don't know if he also let them call his dad a criminal and a murderer. But he said, anything for the money, anything for the money. That's who Ted Cruz is. So Ted, don't try to pretend you're a populist now. That ship has sailed. And this promise is very empty. And you tell me you're not gonna take any more money from the Mercers, you tell me and prove to me that you're not taking money from dark money PACs, then we got a deal. Until then, you're now and have always been a fraud.
It's a good place to leave it. When we come back from the break, Joe Manchin has thoughts on DC statehood. Spoiler alert, he likes the undemocratic route. We'll give you that story and more when we come back.
Back during the break, let me read a bunch of your comments, including the one I wanted to read, Spice Boy wannabe. So, writing in, they say, "My husband and I were going to list our home in a couple of weeks as we are about to close on a new one. We're moving for all the reasons you said earlier. Both of us working from home and also wanting to adopt kids makes us want a bigger place. That said, the market is so hot right now that we're already received letters from 2 different realtors saying they have clients who want to see our home already before we've even listed. They appear to be both families who live here, but I could attest to things moving quickly." So that's the real world. That's why I love reading the member comments, okay? So that you can see it's happening in the real world. Okay, so Mickey C. the Silver says, "We have to give the Republicans credit. At least they're honest. They're openly admitting their corruption, racism, hate, fascism, and love of violence." Fair. Just Be Anti-Racist says, also Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, and other Republicans attempting to brand themselves as the working class party is a joke. And Jess, I hope I just explained the reasoning behind your comments, so I couldn't agree more. Jay Hufford, this is all from our member section, tyrt.com/join, writes in, "The CIA is woke now. Their new ad is like an old guy at an ad agency used a woke buzzword generator." Yes. Screenshot. This is from the actual site, a CIA website apparently.
We'll do that story tomorrow.
Okay, so Anna says we're gonna do it tomorrow. Actual quotes from this new CIA recruitment ad. "I am a woman of color. I am a cisgender millennial. I've been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. I am intersectional. I think it's safe," and then Jay Hufford says, "I think it's safe to say the contemporary American left has failed." So yeah, when the CIA is using a woke cover that they've copied from the politicians, we've both won and lost at the same time. So it's a really interesting story. Maza writes, "And Jake, from your expertise, when do you predict the bubble will burst?" About the housing bubble. Well, am I an expert on this issue? Well, look, did I go to Wharton Business School? I guess. Anyway, no, seriously, Anna's more of an expert on this than I am. And it's really nearly impossible to tell unless you're gonna look at the off the book transactions and get a sense of the size of the derivative market. But Nomi Prince is great on this, and we have her on the show every once in a while, and she gives great details on it. And then Lauren wrote in, super excited to now be an official member of TYT. A former co-worker and now dear friend Julia gifted me a sub and introduced me to this amazing community and an outstanding news source. Now I'm a proud TYT member. Thank you for all the hard work you guys do. Well, first of all, Lauren, welcome. And thank you for saying it's a wonderful community. We like to think so. And I love that your friend gifted you a subscription and that worked. And that was one of the projects we had. We wanted to introduce you guys to what we're doing. And I love that you stayed. And by the way, Corey Matt, Anthea Napper, Cesar Pena, all just joined by hitting the join button below. You guys are awesome. TYT, Cenk and Anna with you, just go.
All right, well, why don't we talk a little bit about DC statehood and what Senator Joe Manchin, a conservative Democrat, has to say about it. Senator Joe Manchin is willing to show Democratic voters just how low he's willing to go in parroting right-wing talking points. This time it's in the context of DC statehood, a state that has, or I should say an area of the country that has nearly 700,000 residents, but they don't get the Democratic representation they deserve. So there has been an effort in order to make DC a state to ensure that they're properly represented in this representative democracy. But Joe Manchin, a conservative Democrat, isn't having it, and he gives you a weak sauce reason for why in this interview. Take a listen.
Do you support or oppose congressional action to make Washington, D.C. a state?
I did a deep dive on that, and I had my staff go through it. It's not a new one. The D.C. statehood's not a new one. President Reagan's Justice Department really carefully reviewed it with legal scholars in 1987. President Carter's Justice Department did the same thing 10 years before that. Attorney General Bobby Kennedy looked into it. They all came to the same conclusion. If Congress wants to make D.C. a state, it should propose a constitutional amendment. It should propose a constitutional amendment and let the people of America vote. There are a lot of things that make this different than any state and territory. But the most important that comes to statehood is the 23rd Amendment of the Constitution.
So do it, if it's going to be a statehood question, it should be done by constitutional amendment. It should not be done by, you would oppose a unilateral action by Congress to make DC a state, correct?
And I would tell all my, yes, I would.
Okay.
And I would tell all of my friends, hey, Hop, I would tell them this. It's going to go, if you go down that path because you want to be politically popular or whatever you're seeking out of this, you know it's going to go to the Supreme Court. Every legal scholar has told us that. So why not do it the right way and let the people vote and see if they want to change?
It's interesting that he claims to have done a deep dive because any individual who did a deep dive on this matter would want to understand how all these other states became part of this union, right? How did other parts of this country become states? Was it done by a constitutional amendment? No. That's actually not how it happened. So the reasoning that he's giving you is ridiculous, and he's also lying to you when he claims that he's done a deep dive. He's done no such thing. In fact, Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton, also a Democrat, said that those who make such an assertion are conflating a policy choice and a constitutional requirement. All 37 new states were omitted by Congress, and there has never been a successful constitutional challenge to the admission of a state. The Constitution commits admission decisions solely to Congress. Looks like she did a deep dive. Looks like she did a deep dive. Maybe with Jordan Ewell, who hosts a show called Deep Dive on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/TYT. But Senator Manchin did not do a deep dive.
Yeah, and nor is he allowed on Deep Dive the show.
He's allowed, but he'll get crushed.
Yeah, we allowed him here. I did an interview with him on TYT. I thought it went fairly well for me as Jenks. All right, anyways, Tom Zawacki is one of our members and he wrote in, Anna, you should have ended the joke at Joe Manchin has thoughts. Okay, so now let's get to the reality. So now you know that every state was admitted without an amendment. Alaska was in 1959, simple majority of Congress, Eisenhower signs it, it's done. It's that simple, okay? The very thin excuse they have is, the 23rd Amendment talks about the District of Columbia, where that holds the seat of power, and it gives them the ability to vote for president, okay? It sets up a system to do that. Okay, great. Where does it say in the 23rd Amendment that it cannot be a state? No, it gave them some representation. Now, it left out their representation in Congress, so they don't have senators and they don't have a congressperson. Now, the fact that they let them vote in the presidential elections does not mean that they were not allowed to have a congressional member or be in a state. I read that amendment 3 times today because he said it so confidently. I was like, wait, did I miss it? Does it say somewhere that it's not allowed to be a state? No, it doesn't say that at all. Does it say that they're not allowed to have any other representation? It does not say that at all. And if Joe Manchin is so confident that he's right about the Supreme Court, well, then that's easy. And he's got a 6-3 advantage you packed with conservatives, right? So why don't we vote to make DC a state and then let it go to the Supreme Court? And if you're right and you've done your deep dive, then the Supreme Court, which is very conservative, will read the amendment and go, yeah, it prevents DC from being a state and you'll win. That's it, problem solved. So you have no excuse not to vote for it, okay? Now guys, let's go to the heart of the issue. There's over 700,000 people in DC and they don't get to have representation. We did the American Revolution because of taxation without representation. That is exactly what happens, ironically, in our nation's capital. And so it's unconscionable, and there is no logical argument against it. That's why Senator Tom Cotton had to go to deeply racist arguments. Yes, in fact, we have that deeply racist argument for you. Just as you watch this, keep in mind that DC's population is 46% Black or African American. So it's an important stat to keep in mind as you hear the ridiculous argument that Senator Cotton makes in this video.
Washington doesn't have the size or diversity of interest of even the smallest of the 50 states. Washington also doesn't have the diversity of interest and financial independence that Madison explained were necessary for a well-functioning state. Yes, Wyoming is smaller than Washington by population, but it has 3 times as many workers in mining, logging, and construction, and 10 times as many workers in manufacturing. In other words, Wyoming is a well-rounded, working-class state. A new state of Washington would not be.
So he's claiming, first of all, who cares what type of jobs the people living in any particular area hold? Democracy is supposed to be democracy, and people living in DC deserve representation. Also, he's just lying to you. He's pretending as if he cares about workers, when in reality, what he's actually concerned about in terms of, DC not being well-rounded enough is the fact that nearly half of the people living there are Black. That's what this is about.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, look at the code words he used. They were not very well disguised. There's not enough diversity of interest there. In other words, there's not enough white people there. When you talk about diversity when it comes to Black people, it's like, diversity is terrible. We don't need diversity. Tucker Carlson every day talking about how diversity has hurt this country, not helped this country. When there's not enough white people, all of a sudden, wait, we need diversity. We need diversity, otherwise you can't be a state, right? And then there's not enough financial interest there. Are you saying there's not enough bankers to bribe you? What the hell does that mean? Okay, there's not enough logging and mining. I checked the Constitution. I'm pretty sure you don't need to have logging or mining to be a state. That's an absurd claim. But my favorite of the racist, they weren't really dog whistles, they were human whistles, we could all hear it, was when he said, it's not a well-rounded working class state. You racist piece of crap. What the hell does that mean? Well, there's no people working in the District of Columbia? They're not well-rounded. How, Tom? How are they not well-rounded? How are they not working for a living, Tom? Okay, so now we all know Tom Cotton's racist. He just declared it. But I'm here to tell you that anybody who votes against DC statehood, they're voting against it for 2 reasons. One, they don't want the Democrats to have another state where they would have 2 senators. That's obvious. Let's acknowledge that, right? So I get why the Republican Party doesn't want it. But Manchin he's a Democrat, so theoretically he would want 2 more Democratic senators. Number 1, he doesn't because he would lose some leverage.
Yes.
He loves being kingmaker, right? But number 2, more importantly, the only other reason to oppose DC as a state is I don't want those hundreds of thousands of black people voting. I don't want them represented in Congress because they're not well-rounded. They're not diverse enough. They're not working class enough. So if Joe Manchin doesn't mind the Democrats picking up 2 seats, there's only one other reason he'd be against DC statehood, because he's a vicious racist. So I don't care if he cries about that. It's, oh no, I just want to take away voting rights from hundreds of thousands of African Americans, but I will get hurt, my feelings will get hurt, not from taking their votes away, but if you call me a racist for taking their votes away. Well, I got bad news for you, Senator Manchin. No deal, you're a goddamn racist. Anyone who votes against DC statehood is definitely racist, saying those black people should not have representation. If by the principles of our founding fathers, they should actually do a revolution. Now, I don't want them to do that. I want us to do this in the constitutional and political way. But when the people in power say, no, I don't want these black people to be represented, you're gonna have massive problems.
Yep.
And the least of which is us explaining to the audience how racist Joe Manchin is.
Well, let's move on to other politicians in the context of state legislatures who go against the will of their own constituents. The latest example is in Missouri. Lawmakers in Missouri have decided to brazenly go against the will of their own constituents who voted overwhelmingly to expand the state's Medicaid program. Now, while this is happening in Missouri, it's important to keep in mind that GOP-led state legislatures throughout the country have been following a very similar trend. Let's take a look at what's happening in Missouri, though, where back in August, 53% of voters in Missouri approved the expansion to Medicaid, allowing an additional 275,000 Missourians to become eligible for Medicaid later this year. So this was done through a ballot initiative, and that is, a majority of voters, 53%, they want this expansion to happen. Now, in voting against funding Missouri's Medicaid expansion, the state Senate's top budgeter, Republican Dan Hedgeman, said, quote, "If the voters had all the information we do, I think they would have made a different decision."
Okay, so I got to, before we even get to the other states, etc. All right, number 1, that's the most arrogant, elitist thing I have ever heard.
100%.
I do declare if the voters weren't so ignorant, they would have obviously voted with the Republicans and made sure that they don't get their own health care. They would have, of course, voted with corporate interests and make sure that they were slaves to the insurance companies and didn't try to liberate themselves by expanding Medicaid. The voters are so stupid, the Republican leader explained. Okay, second of all, you're either gonna have ballot initiatives or you aren't. You don't get to have ballot initiatives, and if they vote in favor of corporations, go, great, fine, we tricked you with all the millions of dollars we spent on ads. Now you get to serve corporations even more and they get to crush you more. But if you vote against corporate interests, how dare you? Nope, you didn't mean it, you didn't mean it. We're just gonna wipe it away. I mean, look, man, if you're in Missouri, how do you not get it? You just voted for this. And the Republicans are saying, screw democracy, by the way, for the 28th time in a row, right? They just said it in the 2020 election too. And in this case, they're saying, no, I saw you, it's clear you voted for this, and I don't want you to have it. I'm just gonna rob you. I'm gonna rob you of this particular initiative and of your democracy.
So let's talk about the dirty tricks that GOP-led state legislatures are playing, because you just mentioned, are we gonna have ballot initiatives or aren't we? And when the ballot measures pass, certainly the ballot measures that the GOP lawmakers are not in favor of, what they try to do is make it very difficult for certain ballot initiatives to make it onto the ballot in the future. So they'll make it more expensive in order to engage in that effort. They'll make sure that they'll raise the threshold for the number of signatures they need on petitions to get a ballot initiative on the ballot. So they try to restrict it in an effort to do away with this direct democracy process that happens in many states. Now, this is happening in Missouri. I also want to just quickly touch on the lie that they tell their constituents in regard to expanding the Medicaid program, which of course is the state's healthcare program for, honestly, poor people, needy people, people who don't have the funds or the income necessary to provide health insurance for themselves. What they'll argue is that, well, we just don't have the money appropriated in our state budget. We just don't have the money. We don't have the funds. But when they expand it, they do so under a provision in the Affordable Care Act, which brings in federal money to the state for the sole purpose of expanding the Medicaid program. That was actually a really good part of the Affordable Care Act that many red states decided to deny their own constituents. So in this case, we're not even talking about state funding, we're talking about federal funding, free money to help poor people access healthcare in their state. And it doesn't matter, the GOP in that state has decided, no, we're not interested. We're gonna go ahead and deny what our constituents voted for. Now again, this is a trend that we're seeing across the country. In fact, voters in South Dakota legalized marijuana, they raised the minimum wage, and they also expanded casino gambling. And what did Republican lawmakers in the state do? They moved to make it more difficult to get ballot initiatives onto the ballot. In Montana, voters last year approved a recreational marijuana program that sends a significant portion of tax revenues to conservation purposes, but a Republican-backed legislative plan seeks to instead put up $6 million toward an addiction treatment program before redirecting a third of what's left to wildlife habitat parks and recreational facilities. The list goes on and on, Cenk. They did the same thing in Utah, where voters passed Medicaid expansion back in 2018. Conservative lawmakers delayed its full implementation before adding work requirements. In Arizona, Republicans are looking to eliminate about a third of the revenue from a voter-approved tax increase on the wealthy to fund education. They just don't care. They're not into you, they don't want to represent you, and if you tell them through a ballot initiative that you want certain programs, you want certain policies implemented, they'll just give you the middle finger and say, no, we don't represent you, we represent corporate interests, we represent our own interests, and you can go ahead and F off. That's what they're essentially doing here.
So there are two issues here. One is, it's all Republicans, Republican legislators that are saying, no, we hate democracy. If you vote against our corporate donors, we will kill whatever you said you wanted to do. You want to increase minimum wage? I don't like it. My corporate donors don't like it at all. You want to tax the wealthy? My corporate donors and my wealthy donors, they don't like it at all. So no, we're not going to give you your democracy. So that is the one thing. On that alone, you should always vote against Republicans. I'm dead serious. I don't care what any stupid person in the mainstream media says. Oh no, you never know. Maybe all of these Republicans will turn en masse. Maybe there's one secret good Republican. No, in Missouri, they're screwing you over and over and over again. Every time you vote for something, they go, I don't care. I hate you, I love my donors, so screw you. But let's stay in Missouri, because it's also a nonpartisan issue. Okay, because the Democratic Party sucks too. So don't get me wrong, we're super honest about that. The Republicans, I'm against because they're robbing you of democracy. But look at what the games that they played. So in Missouri, when Josh Hawley's running against Claire McCaskill, they have as a ballot initiative raising the minimum wage. It crushes. It wins with over 60% of the vote, 62% of the vote. McCaskill is a Democrat. She's theoretically in favor of that initiative. She doesn't run on it at all. Why doesn't she run on something that is deeply, deeply popular that could have helped her beat Hawley? Well, her corporate donors don't want it. So she was against it. And she lost. Why? Because Democrats don't mean it. They say they want to increase the minimum wage, but the minute they have an opportunity to fight for it, they don't. And that just happened again at the national level. So voters say, screw you, that I'm not going to vote for you. Hawley pretends to be a populist. He's supposed to be the biggest populist in the Republican Party right now. And he's like, oh, I'm for the little guy, average guy, yeah, right, okay. Gets into the Senate, he knows how his state voted, overwhelmingly to increase the minimum wage. The minute the minimum wage comes up, he's like, no, I vote no, no way, that hurts my poor corporate friends. You're all lying, corrupt political hacks. Don't believe the mainstream media. They tell you these are honest people, principled people having real debates. No, they're all doing exactly what their donors tell them to do. So I've got to give you the last example. South Dakota, they passed this awesome ballot initiative, deeply red state. 60% voted for Trump, okay? Now, a couple of years back, they passed a ballot initiative that says, we're gonna lower the limit on campaign contributions to legislators. Great. We're gonna provide for public financing so that people can raise small amounts from real people in South Dakota. And we're gonna ban you from being a lobbyist for 2 years and ban you from taking gifts over $100 from lobbyists, okay? It passes overwhelmingly. Because even in a red state, in a deeply Republican state, it's not the voters' problem, it's the politicians' problem. The Republican voters say, good, I don't want corruption. And that's what I give credit to Republican voters for all the time. I hit them on everything else, but they hate corruption, and I love that, okay? The legislature comes back in and goes, nope, not gonna do it. I wanna take gifts from lobbyists. So, and I don't want my spending to be limited. I wanna take as much as I can from lobbyists. So they just go, we're gonna overrule democracy. No, you're either gonna have ballot initiatives or you're not. You're either gonna have democracy or you're not. So every time a Republican kills democracy, and they've done it in all of these states, we need the press to be crystal clear. That one is not even. The Republicans say, we will serve our corporate masters at all costs, including killing democracy and voting against our own voters, even if they're Trump voters, even if it's in the red state. We don't care, we hate you, we love our donors, we're deeply corrupt. Yet, here we are. Where else do you hear that? You hear that on NBC, on ABC, on CBS? You hear it nowhere. They're the corporate media, and they're with these same scummy corporate politicians playing a shell game on all of us. If you're in Missouri right now, you should be enraged. And one of the things you should do is vote out every Republican, and by the way, every corporate Democrat in a primary.
That does it for our first hour, but when we come back for our second hour, Senator Mitt Romney gets humiliated and booed. I can't wait to share that story with you all. And the Biden administration's weak answer on the possibility of closing Guantanamo Bay. We'll give you those stories and more when we return.
Came in late to watch TYT Old School, and I hear Cenk Uygur talking about napkins. Is this the kind of nonsense Anna Kasparian was talking about? Gotta love membership privileges. Gotta love them.
Please have Dave on every 4 episodes or so.
Watching Ben Mankiewicz and Cenk Uygur on Old School talking is exactly like watching Seinfeld and George. I'm not sure if that's a compliment.
Who's on Old School today? Is there one? At Dave Kohler. I hope it's not Brett Ehrlich.
This episode of Old School has killed me. Who knew a conversation about good and bad underwear could be so hilarious and relatable?
Couple things about this video. Dave Kohler looks so badass.
There's more than a 73% chance this Old School will be really funny. Cenk Uygur has been up since 4 a.m., so he's tired. Hence, everything will seem funnier to him. P.S. Remember, food talk, new words, and no or very little politics.
Dave Kohler, enjoyed performance on Old School. Can we please hear about your time as a geologist? One geologist to another?
I appreciate that all these people enjoy it because I know Cenk loves to do it, and he does it because he knows the fans love it too.
This looks like a conspiracy. This looks like a scheme to defraud.
The Bush administration put folks into the regulatory agencies who believed in destroying regulations.
Memories of the Great Depression faded.
They stood on the floor of the Senate day after day attacking what they were trying to do.
They just generated all this junk, took home huge bonuses, and then when it collapsed, they said, oh, not us.
What they ginned up was pure extortion, putting a gun to the head of Congress.
Time and again, they heard the devastation that was happening in low and moderate income communities caused by bankers, by lenders, and they chose to ignore it.
I understood that the SEC was not merely a weakened version of what it was supposed to be. It was an agent of Wall Street.
Well, no one's enforcing the law. The criminals take over.
I'll continue to sit. I'm going to continue to stand with the people that are being oppressed.
The president labeled him a son of a bitch.
I don't think it's good to be a distraction to your team.
To stand
proudly for the national anthem.
You know, some of these people need to move to another country.
Well, you shouldn't be playing. You shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be in the country.
The president is put in place to amplify the racists in this country. Black men and boys are killed at an exponentially higher rate than white men and boys, as outlined by PBS. Black people are most likely to be killed by police, found mappingpoliceviolence.org. Personally, my biggest gripe is not seeing how sports and politics have been attached at the hip. From the jockey syndrome, to the Negro Leagues, to Tommy Smith and John Carlos, Muhammad Ali, to modern day and everything in between. This is not an escape. It is a reflection of reality and a reflection of the times.
Walking the dog on the White House lawn with that.
I'm Mike Shekels, and I'm the Director of Technical Operations. So if you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it. This here is Johnny Greenwald.
I'm Manager of Post-Production Technology. Simplest terms is I deliver the content.
And this is our master control room. We have many, many more destinations than ever before, and we created this room to consolidate it, to make sure that everything's going out is up to standard, so we meet all of our contractual agreements.
All right, back on TYT. I just want to give two more shout outs to folks on Twitch just to rub it in for Bill Maher. Null Unit gave 5,000 bits. That's a lot. Thank you, Null Unit. You're not null to us. And said, how's the TYT fam this evening? Well, after your 5,000 bits, better. Thank you. and Shayla Lynn wrote in, have to say these Bezos bucks are a great way to add onto my membership through the website. Love you, Cenk and Anna. Shayla Lynn, love you right back. And I want you to guys understand what she's saying. I think she's a member on the website through tyt.com/join, but it's also free to be a member on Twitch. We get the revenue for that, but you don't have to pay if you have Amazon Prime. So that's awesome. Go to tyt.com/prime and we'll show you in 30 seconds how to become a member. And that really, really helps the show, and we deeply appreciate it. Thank you. All right, Anna.
All right, the story. Poor Mitt Romney. Senator Mitt Romney, an outspoken critic of Donald Trump's, did not get a welcome reception while he was speaking to Republican voters at the Utah Republican State Convention. Here's how it went down.
Who says what he thinks, and I don't hide the fact that I wasn't a fan of our last president's character issues. And I'm also no fan. Aren't you embarrassed? And I'm also no fan of the president's. Yeah, sure.
My friends, this was the moment I was talking about. Please, thank you, show respect.
Oh, the moment where he's like, aren't you embarrassed? I'm like, Romney, not the way to go about this. It's just, but there's no winning because he's still just as delusional as Mitch McConnell is about the state of the Republican Party. The state of the Republican Party revolves around Donald Trump. That is not gonna change. It's just not gonna change. This is what the party has become.
Yeah, the mittens came off there. And so look, couple things. Utah is supposed to be among the Republican states, like the most civil. They've got this very, friendly Mormon attitude. Plus, they're actually very pro-immigrant, which is unusual for a red state because Mormons immigrated to Mexico and then back to America and have an immigrant culture because they came originally from the east to the west. So if anywhere that message of, hey, look, we don't like Trump's character, but we love all his policies and all that stuff would work, it would be Utah. And it's not even working there. No, the party is gone. They're not getting it. Anna's right. Mitch McConnell talking about Tim Scott is the future of the Republican Party? No, you sound like the past of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
Like, hey, don't worry about racism and aren't corporations great? No. I mean, to the credit of the Republicans, they think these days that corporations are not that great and corrupt politicians are not that great. To the discredit of the Republican voters, they think racism not so bad, democracy optional, right? Now, to the credit of Mitt Romney, it did take some courage, unless he was completely deluded and thought, oh no, I'll single-handedly win back the Republican Party. It took some courage to say no in the face of what was going to be some degree of wrath, and it turns out a tremendous amount of wrath for voting to impeach Trump twice. He did it, and he was very harsh in his rhetoric against Trump, and he's saying, I'm not gonna back down. This is what I believe, and I agree with you on the policies, but I don't agree with you on Trump. And that I'll give him credit for that courage.
Well, that courage, I guess, for lack of a better word, continues in the next clip. Let's take a look at that, and then we'll talk about the GOP attempting to censure him.
So yeah, I understand that I have a few folks that don't like me terribly much, and I'm sorry about that. But I express my mind as I believe is right, and I follow my conscience as I believe is right. I'm not a fan of the current president's policies. In his inauguration speech, you probably heard it, he promised bipartisanship. And I guess by bipartisanship, he means the Democratic Party on one side and the socialists on the other. And then this week, he correctly said that China poses an existential threat to our democracy. And his answer to that is apparently 2 years of free TK, excuse me, 2 years of free pre-K. I like Joe Biden. He's a nice person. I think he has good intentions, but I think. But at the same time.
Okay, so I want to just quickly mention that video demonstrated that Senator Romney is having a difficult time figuring out what his own political ideology and branding should be. Because in that video, clearly he's trying to kind of speak out against some of the more progressive policy proposals coming from the Biden administration. We've already talked about how those policy proposals are not enough for what we would like to see. But he's trying to speak out against these programs that, honestly, if they were proposed by Donald Trump, his constituents would love it. They would love it, because the one thing that Trump did that worked was this fake populism, right? Pretending as though he understands and empathizes with the economic concerns of Americans, and particularly Republican voters. Now, clearly he doesn't actually care about those things. He didn't actually deliver on those things, but his rhetoric was very different from his actions. Now, putting that aside, remember, Cenk, Romney was one of the Republicans who proposed a pretty good program for child tax credits. Now, it was a Trojan horse and it would have cut government programs that people need, but on the surface, he was attempting to appeal to Republican voters much the same way that Donald Trump did. And then it's interesting to see him in that video where he reverts back to the old school GOP talking points that are against the government programs meant to help Americans.
Yeah, of course. And so, look, man, I'm telling you, there's a strand within the Republican Party, the Republican voters, that is a positive one. They now can't stand corporate politicians like Mitt Romney. So that's really positive, and they're rebelling at this basically corporate control, elitist establishment types. And that's a wonderful development overall. The problem is they gotta let the racism and the fascism go, and they're just not there. And that's part of that comes along with right-wing populism. The other thing is, look, I'm not in favor of civility. I think civility is code word for don't fight, don't do anything, don't change anything, etc.
Just be quiet.
Yeah, be quiet. But man, there are some bounds of reason. Like, and I don't mean them booing Romney. Great, boom, what do I care, right? But when he says like, I like Biden as a man, they're like, boo, God damn it, boo, right? Like, I don't need to, I think Biden is too corporate controlled, but I don't despise him as a person.
Right.
And there's like this viciousness in the right wing that they just can't get away from.
Now imagine though, Cenk, imagine if Biden actually delivered on what he claims he wants to accomplish, which is, the American Families Plan, the infrastructure plan, these proposals that absolutely would improve the lives of the very people who were booing him in that video. Biden has an opportunity here, right? Not through rhetoric, but through actually fighting for and accomplishing policies to improve these people's lives and actually deliver what Donald Trump claimed he wanted to deliver.
Yeah.
He has an opportunity.
He's not gonna do it.
But that's the thing. And if he doesn't do it, that paves the way for a crushing political loss in an upcoming presidential election. It just does. It just does. This is it. I mean, if the Democratic Party does not deliver, I'm worried about what's gonna happen in the next presidential election. If not then the following presidential election. When, you think people are angry, both in the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, about the economic inequality that we're experiencing today. Imagine how it's gonna be in 4 years or 8 years if this trend continues.
Yeah, so look, there's this specific part of this story, which is, again, I'm gonna give Romney a little bit of different credit too, which is that at least he didn't humiliate himself like Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham, where they just lost all of their moral core. They never had it to begin with, but their dignity, right? And they were like, yes, Donald Trump will do anything you want, and start licking his boots the most pathetic beta way you've ever seen in your life. So at least Romney didn't do that, okay? But the more important part of the story is the general note, which is both corporate Republicans like Romney and corporate Democrats like Biden. They don't get it. The number one reason why Trump was so popular in the Republican Party is not racism or fascism or the cult of personality. Now, those things are real and they did have an effect. But the number one reason is because he told the establishment to F off. And both Republican voters and now a growing percentage of Democratic voters say, yes, yes, please. We hate the establishment. We hate you elitists. You've never done anything for us. Anna's right. If Democrats actually did do something for them, if they actually did pass a $15 minimum wage, they actually got them health care or a permanent child tax credit, etc. By the way, why did Biden's numbers go up? Because, people love Biden and he's from Scranton and etc. No, the only reason Biden's numbers went up and are really high now is because he actually delivered for people. He gave them checks. He did something about unemployment and the foreclosures, etc. So the minute he stops doing that, which is imminently, they're gonna go back to losing those voters, and the establishment cannot see past their own perspective. They think they're beloved by the American people, and they are not. Trump, who is the worst of us, became that popular on one simple thing: screw the establishment.
Now, one final thing I wanted to mention is that Republican lawmakers were attempting to censure Senator Romney, and they almost did, but they decided not to by a very narrow margin. After the Salt Lake Tribune described a vigorous debate, delegates, excuse me, delegates at the state party convention on Saturday voted narrowly against censuring him, 798 to 711.
And remember, they censured Liz Cheney and almost everyone else in their state parties that dared to cross Donald Trump. And here, Romney barely survives the censure vote, but the message is loud and clear in both the vote and the boos. No, this is Donald Trump's party. And if you think anything else, you're totally kidding yourself.
When we come back from the break, we'll discuss what the Biden administration is planning to do about Guantanamo Bay, a prison that the Obama administration had promised to shut down, but didn't. We'll come right back.
back on the Young Turks during the break. Shout outs to people who just joined on YouTube by hitting that join button below. Steve Wadlowski, Rachel Kirstein, Vincent Ardolino, Mandy Rude Benet, and Leslie B. Are you guys American heroes? Yes. So thank you for helping our progressive voice be louder and stronger and getting out the message more and driving towards change. And remember, at the Essentials level, you get the bonus episode every day of the Young Turks. And at the premium level, you get the bonus episode of all of our shows, including Old School, which restarts live today. So everybody will get the first 45-minute episode for free. So make sure you're watching at 10 o'clock tonight, right here. And then the second bonus episode of another 45 minutes will be for the folks who signed up, at least on YouTube at the premium level. You'd also sign up at tyt.com/join. And as we've told you now a couple of times, to say the least, you could also join on Twitch at twitch.tv/tyt. And if you have Amazon Prime, it's free for you on Twitch. We'd love it if you did both because it's, again, if you have Amazon Prime, it's free there. All right, so let me go to Twitch folks right now. William Logston says, Cenk, Anna, and the rest of the TYT folks have had a tremendous effect on progressives like me from rural America. In a place where being a leftist is about as rare as being a unicorn, you guys are a beacon in the darkness showing us the way, so shine on. Man, that makes my life. So I love hearing that. I love that it had that effect on you. Stay strong, brother. There's tons and tons of us out here. In fact, there's more of us than there are of them, no matter how you're treated in rural America, wherever you happen to live. And eventually we'll win those areas too. We just got to get the message out. Where Bain CEO writes in, funny enough, but not Romney's Bain, the other Bain. TYT, best place for smart thinking people, the hottest host.
Damn, Cenk, you hot.
I mean, look, I'm not saying anything, I'm just saying. And I appreciate it, brother, okay? And best Twitch mods, and even more than coffee, TYT is too strong. But thank you for mentioning it. TooStrongCoffee.com/TYT. Some of the proceeds come to TYT, some go to Wolfpack, Just Democrats, Rebellion Pack, etc. And it's great coffee and it's organic and fair trade. TooStrongCoffee.com/TYT.
Can I just say hi to our TYT live audience? I actually do check your comments. I know that, look, we've got a lot of different platforms with a lot of different comments, and we want to make sure that we get to everyone. But Zappahart, we love you. Everyone in the TYT live community, just know that we're reading your comments. We're definitely taking your suggestions to heart, and just know that we're not ignoring you. But thank you for writing in and sharing your point of view. I know that many of you are members yourselves. You just like to communicate via TYT Live, and so please continue doing that. Just know that we're reading you and we love you.
Progressive Canuck wrote in, I've been a TYT member for 5 years, now 8 months on Twitch. I love that you're doing both. Really, really appreciate it. I'm gonna run out of time. We'll do more comments in the next break. We'll see you in a sec. Back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. I'm gonna read just one member comment here from our member section on tyt.com. Colorado Blue Blazer Regular wrote in, correction on your phraseology, Cenk. Politicians don't have corporate donors, they have corporate owners. I like it. That's why I like doing the show with the members. All right, Casper.
All right, let's talk about Guantanamo Bay. I'm sure many of you haven't heard that word in a long time, but Guantanamo Bay is still in existence, even though the Obama administration had promised to shut it down. During an interview with 60 Minutes, Secretary of State Antony Blinken was asked about whether the Biden administration is going to actually do what the Obama administration promised to do but failed to do, shut down Guantanamo Bay. And unfortunately, Antony Blinken, who's been pretty terrible on foreign policy during the Biden administration so far, gave a pretty non-committal answer, saying, we believe that it should be, that's certainly a goal, but it's something that we'll bring some focus to in the months ahead. So it's a pretty dismissive answer, to be quite honest with you, and it definitely implies that there hasn't been much thought behind shutting it down. Now, why should we shut down Guantanamo Bay? Well, you should consider the fact that there are dozens of people in Guantanamo Bay right now, imprisoned without an upcoming trial date, without charges. And it goes against everything that the United States claims to be in favor of, including justice. Former presidents have promised to shut it down, much like former President Obama. He promised to close down the camp, but bipartisan opposition from Congress blocked him from doing so. And then Trump comes in and he signs an executive order in 2018, keeping the camp open indefinitely. And just to give you a sense of what the prison is like and what type of inmates are currently there. There are currently 40 detainees left in the prison of the original 780. Of these, only 2 have been convicted by military commissions. 7 others have been charged and face trial. 3 have been recommended for trial, and the rest have not been charged, but have been deemed impossible to transfer out for security or other reasons. And honestly, that excuse is absolutely ridiculous. Imagine being an innocent person who's imprisoned for nothing, really. And all you hear for why you're not being released is security reasons, Now, I have a video that I want to show you guys that features 3 ex-Guantanamo detainees and what they went through in the form of CIA torture. But before we get to that, Cenk, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, so there's 2 problems here, guys. One is there's very likely some innocent people left in Guantanamo Bay, and they've been there for now nearly 2 decades. So why are they likely to be innocent? Well, there were bounties that were paid for capturing people that were Taliban or Al Qaeda. So what did people who are starving in Afghanistan do, or bad guys? And sometimes the Taliban themselves were like, oh yeah, that guy fighting us, he's Taliban. Give me $5,000. So we round up a bunch of people. We have no idea who's innocent or guilty, and we put them in Guantanamo Bay, and then it became a political, hot potato. So, like the Democrats didn't want to fight to close it, and the Republicans loved it. So now they're sitting there, and basically America's saying, we don't care if you might be innocent. We're never going to give you a trial, and we're never going to let you out. So that leads to the bigger problem. Well, what's bigger than keeping innocent people there for all this time? Which is American principles. Who are we, right? Is that what we do?
Yes,
we imprison people without a trial, without going to show them before court? The whole reason, why are they in Cuba? Guantanamo Bay is in Cuba. So it's a military base we control within that island. They're in Guantanamo Bay because the Bush administration declared that outside the law. No, America does not have places outside the law. Now, there's new outrage against Donald Trump in his term and beyond because he didn't follow the law, and he never follows the law. I love that outrage, that's true. It's my #1 issue with Donald Trump. But this is not new. Cheney and Bush did this all this time. Obama barely fought back. By the way, you notice it was bipartisan opposition. Democrats wanted to keep it open too. Corporate Democrats were like, no, I don't know. We hate American ideas. I think some people, as long as they're Muslim or brown or whatever, some people that we can't relate to, let's just imprison them for life. Who cares?
Yeah, like Abu Zubaydah, who's still a detainee in Guantanamo Bay. And I remember you did great coverage about him years and years ago on TYT. He's still a detainee in Guantanamo Bay. He's been cleared of any wrongdoing. He's completely innocent. US forces captured Zubaydah and declared him one of the senior leaders of Al Qaeda. It's been 15 years since the CIA quietly revoked that assessment once it was done torturing him. Toda, a forgotten man, he remains locked inside Guantanamo Bay, a living symbol of the permanent damage wrought by the war on terror. And according to the landmark Senate torture report that was released a long time ago, August 16th of 2006, the agency formally concluded that Zubaydah was not a member of Al Qaeda. So since 2006, when he was cleared of any wrongdoing, they've decided, nah, we're gonna keep him there. And now the UN has gotten involved because these are giant human rights abuses. Keep in mind that the US government even during the Biden administration, is going around arguing that other countries are engaging in human rights abuses. What about our human rights abuses? And to answer your question, Cenk, yes, this is who we are. This is our identity. This is the United States government. And we need to accept it in order to correct our wrongs. Now let's get to this Vice video, which features 3 former detainees at Guantanamo Bay. They're the lucky ones. I mean, after being tortured and everything, they were cleared of wrongdoing, and luckily they were eventually released. But they talk about the torture that they underwent when they were detainees, and you should watch it. Take a look.
They used to strip us all naked. Right in the beginning, they sliced all our clothes off and spat at us and punched us and degraded us in ways that's really hard to, even now, hard to describe. And that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to remove our sense of individualism, remove our sense of humanity, and give us each a number. And we'll remember our numbers to this day. We use them for 86. All sorts of things.
086. And there was times where you would see detainees get beat up and dragged around and their head flushed in the toilet, head smashed off the sink. That's how prison was. And we just had to live with it. Some detainees were mentally and physically strong enough to just overcome it and just move on with life, take every day as it comes. Some detainees weren't. A lot of them tried to commit suicide. There was a few guys in front of us who tried to commit suicide. It's not the best sight to see. I mean, and I was only 18 then, and it's the first time I see someone try to kill themselves. And then it happened a few other times with other detainees. One detainee, he jumped off his bunk, tried to bang his head onto the sink because the sinks were made of metal.
I had a panic attack once in my cell. So they sent a psychiatrist, and she sits opposite my cell and says to me, 558, which was my number, have you ever considered removing your trousers and threading them with your sheet and then using that to tie a noose around your neck and then tying it into the corner of the cell and jumping off? Have you ever considered that? I said, no, not until you put the thought in my mind.
That's the United States CIA. That's our CIA. That's what they did. And so when you have the New York Times just regurgitating their insight on what's happening around the world and what the United States needs to do and engaging in additional forever wars, just understand that the stenography that the New York Times engages in is incredibly toxic and absolutely disgusting. That is not a scoop. That's not breaking news. That's just regurgitating what the CIA has to say about alleged threats to national security. That's not journalism. And they need to take responsibility for the crappy reporting that they've done on foreign policy.
Okay, my last couple of thoughts here. So we started torturing these people and detained them forever, even though a lot of them were innocent. And then the lawlessness spread. Then Obama decided to do drone strikes where they did not get any judicial approval for executions, including of American citizens. Now you probably didn't hear that because the mainstream media covers up for Obama, and the right-wing media likes that, so they don't want to. They criticize Obama for wearing a tan suit and putting mustard on his burger, but not for executing American citizens abroad without any judicial approval. And Eric Holder's career should be ruined. Instead, he's celebrated because he said, due process is not necessarily judicial process. In other words, no, the executive branch can decide to murder American citizens without any trial or any hearing or ever going to a judge. That is not due process. That is deeply shameful, okay? Now, what did Trump do? He doubled down on the drone strikes. Of course, he doubled down on Guantanamo Bay. Now, Biden comes in, what does he do? We'll look into it. He ain't gonna look into it. They'll just put another commission on there, run out the clock like everybody else does, because it's too politically perilous in their minds. It'll be, and you know what, when Obama did release some of the prisoners that were massively innocent, clearly, obviously innocent from Guantanamo Bay, he had to do these deals with foreign countries to take them. None of the foreign countries wanted to take them. Finally, an island nation, I think it was Bahamas, took a couple of them in. They were, by the way, Uyghur Turks originally from China, the same people that are now being kept in concentration camps in China that we were criticizing China for. We kept them in a concentration camp called Guantanamo Bay. And when they got released, because they were innocent, Fox News went and took pictures of them swimming in the ocean. Again, I think it was in the Bahamas. And O'Reilly did a segment going, look at these guys. Look at them, they must be guilty. And now they're having the time of their lives swimming in the ocean. Why must they be guilty, O'Reilly? Even the Bush and Cheney administration said they weren't guilty.
Shit.
Look at them, they're so brown and Muslim. They must be guilty. And that's the demagoguery that has led to the Republicans loving Guantanamo Bay and the Democrats being cowards and not doing anything about it.
Yeah, I love a sexual abuser pointing fingers at innocent people and accusing them of being guilty. We got to take a break. When we come back, we'll lighten it up. I know that was heavy, but we'll talk a little bit about a right-wing host losing his mind over a sweet moment that Biden shared with his wife.
All right, back on TYT here. Going to our member section, Mickey C, the silver-haired dragon, writes in, torture, Anna, we don't torture prisoners. We only practice enhanced interrogation. Yep, just change the words, it'll be all right. And the drone strikes, they were not extrajudicial assassinations. They were signature strikes, just a signature, not a big deal, okay? And by the way, we haven't heard anything about whether Biden continues to do drone strikes. That's an interesting question. But I mean, the press asking an interesting question. Well, to be fair though, they did ask Blinken on 60 Minutes about Guantanamo Bay, so thank you. LJ Wombology writes in, how did the states become states? Settler colonialism, bruh. I just like that different take on our discussion of DC statehood. Mark Buggs, AKA MBZ, writes in, oh, MBZ, I get it. Manchin would lose his power because he could no longer be the last Dem vote if there are 2 more seats. That is why he will not support. He likes being the de facto president. That's true, but then Biden lets him get away with it. Who's president, Biden or Manchin? Right now, the answer is definitively Joe Manchin, because it's not Biden's agenda that's passing. It's only Manchin's agenda that's passing. Fact. The Screamo Dragon wrote in, Mike on Central Committee talked about how they split the Dakotas in 2 and added Idaho as well within months. That's true, but look, there's other comments here. Let me see if I could find one to give you the context. Right, Lynn on YouTube Super Chat wrote in, I may have gotten this wrong, I'm a Canadian, but Manchin is from West Virginia. Isn't there something about states splitting up, not being allowed or something? So no, of course, states can split up, have split up. And West Virginia used to be part of Virginia, and they split up and became their own state. They didn't need a constitutional amendment to do it, okay? And Congress approved it and it was fine. Manchin is from West Virginia, okay? There's no question that he knows how states actually become states. He's just chosen to go on a deceptive rant, and partly again because he knows almost no one in the media will ever check him. Now we got new media and we do check him, but the old guys let him get away with that 24/7, and they're still used to the old rules. And to be fair, mainstream media still is dominant, and so politicians mainly get away with most of their lies. Part of the reason why they hate Twitter, because they get caught on Twitter and they don't like that. Or as Anna would say, they don't like that.
They don't like that.
Okay, player 2 says, has been with us for 11 months on Twitch, but says been here for a lot longer than 11 months. And a lot of them are members on TYT, so that makes sense. PH Diva says, 4 months on Twitch. Thanks TYT for all you do. Extra love to my fave host. Who is it? Who is it? The Salt Dragon.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, three hearts there. So divas, loving divas. Okay, we got more. We'll come right back. Back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you.
All right, let's get to our next story. You ready, Cenk?
Yes, I am.
All right. Joe Biden and his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, seem to really love each other. And that's sweet, it's great. It doesn't have any kind of impact on my life. It doesn't have an impact on any Republican's life. So we should just appreciate that love is love, they enjoy each other, and cool. But a host at Newsmax is not in favor of these tender loving moments, and he lost it over the most irrelevant thing in the world. Watch.
All right, folks, I want you to take a look at this. Joe Biden today getting on Marine One, and he stops and picks up, I think it's a dandelion, but it's a dandelion that hasn't even blossomed into a flower yet. Like, it gives everybody asthma. So you blow it, it goes everywhere, and then everybody starts sneezing. Well, he picks up the weed and gives it to Jill as what I guess is supposed to be some kind of a sweet gesture. He's getting dandelions all over the place. I say it was a planted dandelion there, who knows?
A planted dandelion. Is he saying that, like, the Democratic Party or the Biden administration planted the dandelion so Biden can have that sweet moment with his wife? I mean, what does that even? It was, as Edwin, our stage manager, said today, it was planted by nature. And I don't know what his issue is with that, but what I love is that he's like, oh, he picks up this dandelion, and then everyone's got allergies, everyone's sneezing, and then like he's just making up this weird story in his head, and he's speaking out loud as he's making it up. It's just like, who cares, dude? Is this really what you're covering right now?
Yeah.
Honestly, when I saw that video over the weekend, I thought, it's cute. And then I thought, man, Democratic voters are gonna eat this stuff. What they do, it's a tender moment, and people love tender moments. People love watching other people in love. I get it. It shouldn't take the place of governing and actual policy, but it's a sweet moment, acknowledge it, move on. But no, not Newsmax. You gotta worry about the poor people with allergies who are nowhere near Biden and his wife.
Okay, so let's note that that guy didn't care that Donald Trump thought you should inject disinfectant into your body.
Right.
Okay, he wasn't concerned about those health concerns. He didn't care that Donald Trump talked about hydroxychloroquine and he said that COVID would magically disappear last April. He didn't care about any of those, 570,000 that he didn't care, right? Oh, but what about the asthma? I'm worried about the asthma. Oh, come on. Okay, so, but believe it or not, I have some mixed feelings about this story.
What?
Okay, listen, hold on. So I went through a roller coaster ride, similar to the one you took, but my roller coaster had bigger ups and downs. So for the first time I saw the video, I was like, that's so sweet, right? And then the second thought I had was, wait a minute, was that planned? Because I'm so cynical about politics and then the third thought I had was, nah, Joe Biden, we got tons of criticism for him on policy, et cetera. But ain't nobody think that he doesn't love Dr. Jill Biden.
He loves his
Oh
wife.
my God, I don't know anybody who loves their wife as much as Biden does, okay? And every stop, and I make fun of it honestly, like in a fun, playful way. I mean, it's wonderful to see overall, but like whenever he does a speech, over under on Dr. Jill Biden mentions is 13. And as Jill, I mean, she's my better half. I mean, Jill, I love you, Jill. Okay, oh, sorry, what was I talking about? Like, if anyone's actually going to pick a flower and hand it to their wife organically, if you will, it's Joe Biden, okay? Then I saw that it was a dandelion, and I was like, that's weird, nobody picks dandelions.
Exactly, Cenk. Like, if it was planted in that way, if it was planted, you think that it's gonna be a dandelion?
No way. No, if they had orchestrated it, there's no way he picks a dandelion.
Not orchestrated.
Keep it real. Okay.
We've already made our decision. The court has ruled.
Yes, then we're not doing a poll on it. But then when I saw that it was a dandelion that wasn't the yellow one, but the one I was like, that's weird, right? So I'll keep it real. I did think that for a second. And then I thought, should we do a story about it? And I thought, no way. Okay, why would we do a story about that? And then somebody reminded me, yeah, duh, that's the one where you make a wish. Now, Jill Biden didn't make a wish because she had a mask on. So, and so that's still, it's fine. It's fine. It's not worthy of a story where the Newsmax guy comes out and goes, I wonder what happened.
That guy's got issues, man.
Right.
And like relationship related stuff. Isn't that the same Newsmax host who like recently went on this like weird tear about like his own personal relationship drama? Like, I don't remember the exact context. Brett, I know you're gonna text me. I'm waiting for your text. Give me the deets. I probably should have looked into this ahead of time. But nonetheless, like he's got some problems. And I find it hard to believe that any healthy human being would see that moment and have a problem with it. Now let me brag about how awesome my husband is. So yesterday, Christian and I were walking the dog. We had a long day. We took my parents on a day trip to Santa Barbara. We come back, we're exhausted, but we're both walking the dog together. And we passed by this giant like jasmine plant that was planted in front of someone's house. And the smell, it was just the most beautiful, lovely smell.
And you ripped it out of their yard and gave it to you.
No. This morning I woke up and I commented on how much I love the smell of jasmine. Woke up this morning, Christian woke up before I did. I woke up to the smell of jasmine because he put a jasmine plant right next to my bed.
No, first of all, that was obviously planted. Everybody knows it. Okay, well orchestrated. Okay, and I'm worried about Christian's dementia. No, see, that's super sweet.
Yeah.
Okay, and Biden is sweet. We gotta look. Last thing on this ridiculous story. Okay. Is that I didn't know that Biden was pro-weed, okay? I don't know why he doesn't legalize it if he likes the weed so much. But otherwise, let it go. We're back to, hey, the guy's doing pretty well, so we gotta make up controversies about dandelions. It's not a real controversy. And now Newsmax, you can get mad at me. I don't know if it was the same host either. They all look the same to me.
Oof, yeah.
They're all blockheads, like, oh, yeah, tell you what, man, lies are awesome, democracy sucks. I wish we'd scrap democracy and Trump was in charge.
Yeah.
Look at how bad Biden is. He picks flowers for his wife. We don't even like any of our wives.
As my dad
all
would
sound
say.
the same.
Who cares?
Yes.
Who cares? Doesn't care. And Brett has written in and he says, no clue. So we leave you to figure it out for yourselves because it really doesn't matter. All right, moving on. Michael Flynn, he's in the news, believe it or not. Donald Trump's first failed national security advisor, Michael Flynn, appeared to have forgotten the national anthem after making this jingoistic speech about patriotism. It was a wonderful moment. Let's take a look.
Listen, I'm going to say the Pledge of Allegiance. You're going to say it along with me. And I want you to hear, not just listen, I want you to hear every single word of the Pledge of Allegiance. That is our pledge to each other. That is our pledge to this country. It's a Pledge of Allegiance to the United States of America. So put your hand over your heart. Take your hats off there. Take your hats off. That's an order, right? Place your hand over your heart. I pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, individual, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. God bless.
Man, this was an event put together by Lin Wood, a pro-Trump rally, I guess, by Lin Wood, who's an attorney for Trump. So that in and of itself is embarrassing. And then you have this moment with Michael Flynn saying like, I want you to hear every word. I don't know every word to the Pledge of Allegiance, but that doesn't matter. I'm gonna try anyway. Just disaster.
That was wonderfully embarrassing. He's saying, I want you to hear every word, except the parts that I bungle. Don't listen to that. Okay, he said indivisible at the wrong time. He's got a really loud mic, so it was so obvious. And then he had to just stop because he forgot the words and then picked it back up with indivisible. The one thing he remembers, ironically, is indivisible, given that he was for Trump after the election. Remember, Flynn is the guy who went to the Oval Office after the election and suggested that we do martial law to end our democracy. And that's the guy claiming to be a patriot. So that one of the charges against him that Trump pardoned him on and that he was convicted on was that he was working with the Russians and was dishonest to the FBI about it. Right. Patriot, you lied to the FBI about your relationship with the Russian government. You're not a patriot. You advocated to end our democracy and have the military take over and turn us into a third world banana republic. You're the least patriotic person in the world. And so I love that you mangled it because you're a moron. Speaking of morons, I gotta tell you the last thing. So and I mentioned that it's an event for Lin Wood. He's actually running to be the chairman of the South Carolina GOP.
He'll probably win.
He'll probably win because the Republican voters have lost their minds. So, Cenk, is that really fair? Lost their minds? Lin Wood has said that he might be the second coming of Jesus Christ. Lin Wood has said recently that he thinks that Trump is still in office and all the rest of it is a ruse. Lin Wood is a literal lunatic. By the way, Mike Flynn, it gets like, but because he was national security advisor and he was a high-ranking officer.
Look at that mullet.
No, Mike Flynn is also a literal lunatic.
Yeah, look at that mullet.
Okay, that was Lin Wood.
Oh, who are you talking about? Sorry.
I was talking about Lin Wood in the beginning and then Mike Flynn as well.
Oh, got it. Okay, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, everything that you described could apply to both of them, but obviously I was talking about Lin Wood's fancy little haircut there.
So look, we have accepted that the Republican Party is, look at all those people in the room, for Lin Wood. Like, second coming of Jesus Christ and Trump is still in office. We're all lunatics, Pledge of allegiance, who cares, let the Russians rule. Or whatever, whoever is paying Mike Flynn, we're pro-American. No, you're not. You guys are all deeply un-American. That's it.
Also, I just want to make a quick comment about, I don't think we really allowed ourselves the opportunity to let the fact that Michael Flynn was chosen as a national security advisor, like we haven't let that sink in. Because the Trump era was so chaotic, I mean, you don't really have much of an opportunity to let anything sink in. It's nuts. That guy, who doesn't even know the Pledge of Allegiance, was meant to advise the President of the United States on national security.
Look at these guys, man. Look at the dead eyes. These guys are absolute unbelievable morons. Look, the last thing I'll say is that to tie it back to a story we did earlier, the American people, and especially the Republican Party, lost faith with the politicians and the establishment so much that they were willing to elect literal lunatics. And Trump is a lunatic too. He thought we should nuke a hurricane and inject ourselves with bleach. He thinks wind causes cancer. The Republican Party prefers an insane asylum to the establishment. That should be deeply concerning to the whole country.
Yeah, it absolutely should be. Cenk, we have a few minutes left, and I know that you have a knack for reading member comments and things like that, so now would be a great opportunity for you to do that.
Knack for it. Okay, so guys, we're doing something slightly different. So I told you earlier in the show, Old School's back to being live. It's gonna be on at 10 o'clock tonight. First 45 minutes is free, available to everybody. Please check it out, it's so fun. Today, we're gonna talk about Marilyn Manson and how I've always despised him. Well, okay, we have these fun topics.
Marilyn Manson?
Yeah.
Oh.
Okay, just for fun, okay? He's in the news a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll see. And then there's a second episode, 45 minutes, that's just for the members, bonus episode there. And now our post games, or we're gonna call them bonus episodes going forward. Are they the same thing? Relatively speaking, yes. Okay, we're just changing the terminology a little bit. And because it really is, it's an extra half hour. And some people just do a half an hour show. Some people do a half an hour show a week and with 20 writers.
We do it every day.
Yeah, we do an extra bonus episode every day, Monday through Friday, and our members get that. So, by the way, speaking of which, the folks who just signed up on YouTube, Stephen Matthias, the Blue Flux Wretch, Matthew Budge, Pete Hone, Teresa Lewis, okay, they all hit the join button below. And when you do that, you could upgrade through the same way. Essentials gets you the bonus episode every day of the Young Turks. The premium level gets you all the bonus episodes, and we're unifying the names of these so that they all are the same. Bonus episodes for all the extra stuff for members, okay? At the premium level on YouTube, you also get the bonus episode of Old School and all of our other shows. And obviously you could sign up through Twitch as well. And on Twitch, the people talk about Bezos bucks because it's free if you have Amazon Prime, but we get the revenue. And what I would love is if you could just take 30 seconds to go to tyt.com/prime. If you have Amazon Prime, even if you're a member elsewhere, please also do it through Twitch because that helps the show so much. We love you guys. We can't wait to do more episodes for you guys, including a super fun bonus episode right now for members and Old School later tonight.
So a lot of progressive office holders are doing something fun. I like fun. They're doing the last 2 years in 2 minutes. Okay, we're gonna try it here. First, I wanna let you guys know about the years before that. Hey, remember we started the Just Democrats here on the Young Turks. It was officially launched on our air, basically by you guys. And then we featured AOC, we featured Cori Bush, and Ro Khanna became the first ever Just Democrat incumbent, all on the Young Turks. Now, the last 2 years have been a spectacular follow-up to that. So let's put the 2 minutes on the clock and do this. Young Turks got to start back in 2002, and I think we've been an important part of the progressive movement ever since. What we mainly do is amplify the progressive voice and candidates out there, and I think we've done a pretty good job. Right now, we're currently #1 most engaged news politics network online, beating CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC, all of them. We're #1 in total minutes watched. That means not only the number of people watching, but how long they watch. We just crossed 20 million followers and 500 million monthly views. Now, why? That's because actually the country's progressive. It's 2/3 progressive, and you guys have allowed us to be your voice, and we're incredibly thankful for that. So what did we do with that voice? Well, let's look at 2019. We went all over the country talking to you guys and the candidates. So we were in Miami, we were in Detroit, we were in Houston, and we were in Iowa. In fact, we were all over Iowa. You guys were all over Iowa, and all of the candidates saw you guys. We had wonderful people speaking, like the one and only Nina Turner at our rallies. Bernie Sanders stopped by, Andrew Yang, Elizabeth Warren. We interviewed almost everyone on the campaign trail, with the exception of Biden and Buttigieg. And we held them accountable. We even did a progressive economic pledge, and so many wonderful people signed on to that. Bernie Sanders, Warren, Marianne Williamson, AOC, the entire squad, Justice Democrats, and so many others. Now, on top of all that, we started a show called The Conversation, where we featured so many progressive thinkers, writers, and candidates. And one of the candidates we featured in 2019 was Jamal Bowman. Here comes Jamal Bowman. Then we had an amazing 2020. We hired a climate reporter. Damage Report passed 500,000 subscribers. Young Turks passed 5 million subscribers. We're getting the message out to more and more people. Bernie Sanders comes on in the heat of the primary. He comes on after the election to say what we're gonna do for the future. And then Marie Newman wins. Jamal Bowman wins. Cori Bush wins. And then just when you thought it couldn't get any better, here comes Nina Turner. Hello, somebody. And she's running for Congress, and she comes on the Young Turks first. On election week, we had nearly 2 million hours of viewing. We're #1 destination for progressives. You made all that happen. This is amazing, and thank you for those 2 years. What, I went past 2 minutes? Of course!
Viewers had asked for an interview with the TYT Lizard. Mr. Lizard. Oh, you changed colors today. Nice. I don't even know how you feel about us. Do you even like us?
Well, you guys made me this awesome house, so I'm kind of in your debt. I was found outside on the street, and you gave me a home. Granted, it was a really crappy home for a while, but then through the power of fundraising, I became a person who has a multi-level Trump-style mansion.
You do. By the way, you never looked better, man. Normally, you're just green or just brown, but today you're in mid-lizard, right?
I'm not very smart. I'm a lizard, so I don't know how the science works. I guess this is just my mood. It's not every day that thresholds like this are broken. I'm just so excited. I can't contain my pigmentation.
And now you're showing it off.
Yep.
Yeah, I've never seen the lizard like this before. Young Turks on our new bonus episode. Jay Canada with you guys. All right, we got the fun Bill Maher story for you guys, but before we go there, things are starting to return to normal a little bit, and I'm gonna say it. I'm almost a little afraid to say it, but I ate inside of the restaurant.
You monster.
On Saturday. I went back to Santa Clarita, 25th District, scene of the crime. And I did an interview there, and it's interesting, almost 2 hours. And I ate inside, and it felt surreal. And so just the context in LA, there's almost no cases left, and it's lower number of cases than there has ever been, including at the very, very beginning of the virus. My FVD, there's a new thing, and maybe I'll talk about it on Old School more too. Fully vaccinated day was Friday.
Nice.
So
congrats.
Now it was actually earlier than that, but that was this extra safe version of it. I took Johnson & Johnson, and you're really safe after 15 days. But I read in some places, well, 29 days, you're super duper safe, right? So I waited the full 29 days. And so after my FVD, I went and ate inside. So, and God bless, we got to return to normal. Now, by the way, I've been saying that for a little while. And now you're seeing all over mainstream media, the doctors and the analysts going, outside, we should take the masks off and we should start to go back to normal. And by the way, people are listening. Now in LA, like a week ago, if you just jogged without a mask, even if you were 20, 40, 60 feet away from people,
they'd freak out.
They'd freak out a little bit, right? And now half the people have their masks like a little off or in their hands when they're not near people. And then when they're near people, you put it on. And it's, for me, I've read all I need to know. And everybody's got a different risk ratio. Everybody's got a different way of thinking about it. But for me, I believe there's a near 0% chance, if not actually 0%, of catching or giving coronavirus outside while jogging by someone, okay? But I still put the mask on when I'm, I don't know, within 20 feet of someone, roughly speaking. Mainly for politeness.
Yeah, me too, same. And by the way, not just for politeness, I'm not fully vaccinated yet. But even if I am fully vaccinated, I still respect the fact that there are other people who are uncomfortable. And so for, I guess, as long as it's gonna take, I'm gonna respect them and put the mask on if I'm around others. But I will say, the CDC at this point has made clear that if you're fully vaccinated, you actually do get a cookie. And the cookie is you get to be out in public, outdoors, as long as you're not in a big crowd, without a mask. And I think that it's important to encourage people to get vaccinated through these types of incentives. Because if the messaging from the federal government and the CDC is, no, you have to get vaccinated, but nothing changes, people aren't gonna wanna get vaccinated.
Yeah, and look, we're doing a good job overall, at least in the blue states, right? And so we're supposed to get back to normal. I think Biden's timeline of by 4th of July, we should be having barbecues and things should be relatively okay. I think that's pretty right.
Yeah.
So we're on track for that. Let's hope we get there. I'm gonna say one last thing. So people that work on lawns, gardeners, day laborers, etc. in LA, they all are forced to wear masks outside when they work out in the hot sun all day long. Very likely they already got vaccinated. They're nowhere near anyone else, and they're made to wear masks. Like it's easy for me to wear a mask outside. I'm not out that often, right?
You're not doing physical labor outside.
Yeah, and if I get near someone, I could put the mask on. But they don't have that option, whether it's their companies or whoever it is, or their employers, make them wear a mask the whole day, right?
I mean,
there's got to be bounds of reason at some point.
Yeah, the same is true for Amazon delivery drivers. They're always wearing their masks, and it's not easy delivering heavy packages in the hot sun. I mean, in Los Angeles, the heat is here. Last week, there were at least 2 days where it was so incredibly hot. Like, I went outside early in the morning for a run, and I was like, nope. I went back inside. I'm like, I'm not going running in this heat. That's crazy. But yeah, I agree with you. If you're fully vaccinated, I mean, look, just listen to the CDC guidelines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, you want to do verification that they're fully vaccinated? Great, that's awesome, right? And I'm not freaking out about it or anything. I know we're doing a transition, it's all good, right? But at some point, let them go. Make sure they're fully vaccinated and then let them breathe. That's my take on it. All right, Casper.
So we've got a story about Bill Maher. Bill Maher, believe it or not, is still around, still hosting a show on HBO, and wants the kids to get off his lawn. Watch.
You think someone 80 is hopeless because they can't use an iPhone? Maybe the one who's hopeless is the one who can't stop using it. You think I'm out of it because I'm not on Twitch? Well, maybe I get Twitch, but I just think people watching other people play video games is a waste of time.
I mean, that's the way I feel about people watching his show, but I'm not going after those people. I mean.
Yeah. All right, so a couple of things here. Number one, Bill Maher is super old, okay? And I don't mean age-wise. I'm not a spring chicken either. I mean in his mentality. And so, and like a lot of people set in their ways, and hence ironically conservative, they think there is no other perspective. There is no other way to see it. And that they're clearly right, and the kids on their lawn are clearly wrong, right? And so my kids watch other people playing video games all the time. My 10-year-old son does it. And so first of all, that's not the only thing on Twitch. We're on Twitch, we do a talk show like Bill, right? And by the way, what is a talk show? It's people watching other people talk.
Yep.
Okay, what is sports? It's people watching other people play sports.
Yep.
And so Bill Maher does all that and made a living doing that. And then when somebody does it in a slightly different way, he's like, And that's, look, the main point I want to make is not the most substantive point, but I've got a substantive one too. I can't stand his facial expressions. I'm done with it. Like, he has 20 people writing his script all week long, and then he makes a point that's like either he thinks is slightly funny or slightly bold, and then the faces.
Yeah. Yep.
And then like when he does the joke and watch. There it is. How many times have we seen that face? Oh, I know you.
Right there.
Yeah.
There it is. There it is.
Like, he thinks he's so clever and so courageous. Saying the same thing as every grandpa doesn't make you courageous. Being like, oh yeah, what are these kids watching video game players on Twitch? That one, that's another face right there.
Yep.
That doesn't make you bold, it just makes you 80, okay?
Yeah, I think, first off, being critical toward others who have an interest that you're not interested in sucks. Like, it's just a sucky way to think about other people. Because look, other people get involved in all sorts of things that I might not be into, but I get it, right? So sports is a perfect example. I'm not particularly interested in sitting in front of a television for 4 hours to watch a baseball game like my husband likes to do. But my husband loves it. And I love that he's passionate about something and that he has an interest in something. It brings him joy and happiness. That's all that matters, okay? Same with people who like to watch others play video games on Twitch. And by the way, of course, Bill Maher is minimizing what Twitch is, because people who have their favorite Twitch hosts or whatever, it's because there's like a connection there. They can either relate to them or they like something that they do, whether it's playing video games or maybe a political talk show they do on Twitch, as Jordan Uhl does with Deep Dive. Happy Half Hour is one of my favorite shows on our Twitch channel. That's Brett Ehrlich, just showing really interesting social phenomenons or viral videos. It's not just like, oh, it's just a bunch of kids watching other people play video games. Yeah, that does exist on Twitch, but there's actually a wide variety of content that you can consume on Twitch, enjoy, and there's a sense of community there. And that's the thing that I really want to touch on. Look, right now, we're so atomized, right? Organized religion is declining. People aren't going to church. And as much as I have an issue with organized religion, the one part of it that I think was positive was that sense of community, right? And so that's declining. People going out and connecting with one another, that's declining. People working in actual workplaces and connecting with their own colleagues, that's also declining. So if people are finding connection with others in these communities, we should be supportive of that, even if they're engaging based on something that we're not particularly interested in, whether it's sports, esports, or what have you.
Yeah, so I remember when the esports stuff came out and people started watching video games, other people play video games on YouTube before Twitch even started. And in the beginning, I didn't get it either because it's not my generation. And then I finally figured out a couple of things and it didn't take that long. One is, yeah, they grew up playing video games like I grew up playing kickball, right? So Bill, you remember kickball? Oh yeah, that's a real thing. Video games aren't real, kickball's real, right? Anyway, so to them, it's like watching somebody else play sports, and some of them are great at it. And so since they play video games, they know how hard it is. Seeing that guy execute those things, etc., is very interesting to them. Like I know how hard basketball can be, so LeBron's amazing to me, right? So it's easy to understand. The other thing is that is underrated is that they're the new talk show hosts. So they do very irreverent conversations, they set the culture, etc. And for people that have an older mindset like Bill Maher, to them, they hate that. No, they've got to be in charge. It's got to be the old way. There's got to be a shiny desk, and we have a shiny desk, right?
Well, kind of. Shiny, we have a desk. We do have a desk.
And you've got to have it in a certain way, and it's got to look to these young whippersnappers. They're not even dressed right. Like, yeah, you're stale. You're super stale, Bill Maher. And so that goes to the most important substantive point, which is that Bill Maher is basically a TV executive's version of a rebel. It's like 20, 40 years behind. And Bill likes the old world where they were gatekeepers. And he didn't have to compete with the young guys who are getting way more viewers than him. So it's been a decade since we've been getting more viewers than Bill Maher. They are always like dismissive and patronizing, like, oh, internet, I don't understand what the hell. That's why he said, I know what Twitch is, I just don't like it, right? Because he doesn't know what Twitch is. He never figured out YouTube. And like we have, what is it now? We're at 17 billion views, and they're always like skeptical, like, don't let the TV executives hear that. I might lose my multi-million-dollar contract. Don't let them hear that. No, I'm the only one that's popular. How many did I get on HBO? Like 100,000 people watching or something? Oh, that's the highest number you can get, right? But okay, but look, forget us. Here, fine, I'll say it. Hasan the Hunt, okay? So Hasan has a giant show on Twitch that people love, right? And so who's hotter in terms of where the zeitgeist actually is?
And also physically, let's keep it real.
Well, that's a totally different conversation, not close and not fair to Bill. But okay, and who understands the culture right now of the younger generations? Haas or Bill Grandpa Maher? And that's what's getting under his skin. He's like, oh, why can't we bottle it back up so I look cool because some out of touch TV executive picked me?
Yeah, and I think that there's also the element of people being able to, and look, don't get me wrong, it's difficult. It's not like you can just go on Twitch and you're making enough money to live, but people can start a show on Twitch as Hasan the Hun did, right? I don't know if that's his handle on Twitch, but
that's it. That's on Twitter.
Oh, that's on Twitter. Okay, yeah. but find Hasish. I think it's
Hasanabi.
Hasanabi, exactly. He's working for himself. He was able to build something on his own, and he doesn't have to worry about gatekeepers when it comes to his own business, his own show, his own message. And so there's something really empowering in that regard. And I'm sure that it grates on the nerves of people who went through the traditional route where they had to suck up to gatekeepers and play all these games to appeal to elite people who gave them a shot. Haas didn't have to do that. Other incredibly popular Twitch hosts didn't have to do that. And I'm sure that that's also an element of what's making Bill Maher so salty. But we want to ask you guys what you think. We do have a poll on this, and you can participate by answering this question. Is Bill Maher still relevant? Yes, no? Those are your two options, tyt.com/polls to participate.
So Bill, I don't want you to freak out. It is on the internet, okay? So that poll is online. Online, what's that? I don't like online. What is that? Did a TV executive sanction that poll? Okay, so listen, back like 30 years ago, Bill was cutting edge, right? But he still thinks he is. And again, look, I'll admit to my biases too. It drives me crazy that the TV executives still think that that's hot, right?
Yep.
And they're so clueless and they cannot see outside of their own perspective. And that's the thing we talk about on the show all the time, right? I'll add one last thing. So Haas used to work here at TYT. Yes, he's my nephew, okay? And for all the people who said, oh, he just works at TYT because of nepotism and he's your nephew. What now?
Yeah,
okay?
I know, exactly.
It turns out the guy was incredibly talented and by the way, much larger than us on Twitch,
Yeah,
okay?
yep.
He didn't get that through nepotism. He got that with no gatekeepers, no nothing.
Yep.
He got it on his own talent. And so Bill Maher and the rest of them can go ahead and suck it.
All right, so since you brought that up, let me throw you under the bus a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Just a little bit. No, Jay, I think so when Haas was working here, I think Cenk was so aware that that's his nephew and he didn't want anyone else here to think that he had like an unfair advantage. So you were like, in my opinion, needlessly tough on Haas when he was here.
Okay, we've entered the bonus episode portion of our program.
Definitely the bonus episode. I know you don't like me calling you out on that, but you were. You were tough on him.
Okay, I was tough on him. That's true, but yeah, and yes, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I get to be tougher on him than an average employee because there's tons and tons of rules and regulations, et cetera, right? And so you can't just go and demand more accountability, and I wish we could to keep it real, okay? And so yes, I demand accountability of him, and sometimes in a tough way. But he was a pain in the ass.
He was definitely a pain in the ass.
Okay,
yeah.
so
remember when he used to bring fish to the studio?
Yeah. So Fish is his dog, a big giant
May
dog.
he rest in peace, by the way.
Yeah, no. Look, I love Fish, or now and Fish passed away, and I cried when he did. Okay. But that doesn't mean you can bring him to the office and have him rip the office apart, right? Those are two different things. And so, and this is part of what makes him successful now, but also caused him trouble when he's working at a company, which is that he won't listen to any rules. I'm not talking about Fish, I'm talking about Haas, okay? So Haas doesn't like listening to rules. I can relate, I don't like listening to rules. I didn't want to work at any other company, that's why I set up my own. And so in a sense, he did the same thing, not a company, but a show, right? And so I don't blame him for it, but at the same time, I definitely wasn't picking on him.
Yeah.
It was that he would not follow the goddamn rules.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I had been dismissive of that perspective, and you're correct in bringing that up. And I think that Haas eventually found his way, and he's exactly where he should be right now. I think that that is the environment where he's able to succeed, you know, and I think he's happy. He looks happy. He's doing his thing.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, every once in a while I'll catch his show because I actually do really enjoy watching stuff on Twitch, and he's super engaging. And by the way, he's impressed me with how much he's grown intellectually as well. Like, don't let the bro-y facade fool you. When he does a deep dive on an economic issue, I'm like, you go get him, Haas. You go get him. He gets it.
Yeah. No. I mean, look here. I give Haas another compliment. This is all wrong. Okay? We shouldn't be doing this, but no, seriously. Look, he knows. He has a supernatural instinct on what's hot. So he was woke bay a decade ago? Right? And now Republicans are complaining about things being too woke. And he dropped it 7 years ago and didn't want anybody calling him that because he thought it was already over. Okay? So he is so far ahead of the trend. And then in terms of business and media, et cetera, he saw how hot Twitch was and went there before anybody did and before we did. And that turned out to be an incredibly good decision. And then finally on the substance, and this is why the Bill Maher story is really interesting, not just about all these different characters, but about the trend in media and the trend in culture, et cetera. When you listen to Haas, he's so much wilder than we are, right? And sometimes he says things that are way out there, okay? And you can't say on a show that has other factors, right?
Yep.
And et cetera, right? And people like that because the culture has changed and people don't want to listen to bullshit, right?
Yeah.
And so we don't, substantively, we don't do bullshit, but we have to not curse in non-bonus episodes, right?
We can't talk about dry jerking on this show. We just can't.
Yeah. And he'll do that at the drop of a hat, okay? And so we're kind of, sometimes people criticize us for being mainstream in the online world, right? And in a sense, that's true. We've become the new mainstream, but not in a bad way. In just that we're where the culture mainly is, right? Where the mainstream of the culture is. Haas is on the leading edge of it, or the cutting edge of it, and Bill Maher is fucking Fred Flintstone, right?
Yep.
I might look more like Fred Flintstone than he does, but he's in the Stone Ages and he's sitting there going, these kids these days, they have no respect for their elders. Dude, you got kicked off of ABC because you didn't have respect for your elders, right? Now you're yelling at kids who are outmanning you, outgunning you, and look, handwriting's on the wall. Bill's got maximum a year left. Here, I said it, okay?
Damn.
No, even HBO executives who are super old in their thinking, at some point go, yeah, wait a minute, is this thing still hot after 48 years of saying the same goddamn thing on our air? Bringing on like super tired, bullshitting politicians and having their talking points go back and forth while we're pretending to kid around, is that still an interesting format? That's not an interesting format. You know, you let, okay, I don't want to make it about us. So pick someone else you like, Kyle Kalinske, Haas, whoever. You let them do a real show with real opinions, unvarnished, then you got a show, man. You bring on people that you agree with and disagree with, and from a wide spectrum of thought. You bring on Central Committee, you bring on Chapo Trap House, you bring, I don't know, bring on wild fucking radical right wingers, okay? But make it real.
Yeah.
So what Bill's show is so fucking fake.
It's just out of touch. He's just, and that's honestly, I know that we're definitely picking on Bill Maher here, but this is something that I'm very cognizant of in our own context, because it happens to everyone, right? You kind of get into this pattern and you think that that's the relevant pattern for the rest of your life, but it's not. Society changes, people change, culture changes, technology changes, as we know. And it's important to keep an open mind and be ready and willing to adapt to different ideas, different formats, different platforms. And Bill Maher has been in this incredibly privileged position for so long with this show on HBO that he probably thought, no, this is the end all be all. Like, look, in terms of executive producing this show, the thing that keeps me up at night is, are we keeping up with changing culture and changing tastes, right? I don't want this show to become stale, and I want to be cognizant of what constructive feedback our viewers, our members have for us. Because I don't want to reject what they have to say. If they have ideas that maybe I hadn't thought of, I'm not going to be against that. I want to hear that, and I want to think about ways to implement it so we're always relevant, always fresh, and we're not like stuck in our ways. It's like the worst way to think about doing a show.
Yeah, so I gotta say a couple of things here. So look, HBO and Netflix are still among the best at being more cutting edge, and yet they still would never do a show where the guest or the host says politicians suck, they're corrupt, and they're lying douchebags. They would never do that show. Because, I mean, I don't know how long it's gonna take them, 5 years, 10 more years? How long is it gonna take you to be honest with your audience? And they should be free of all that. But the powerful can't help but have some like thing in their instincts that are like, no, don't actually challenge power, right? Because isn't it amazing that in all of the mainstream media, all the old media, and even in the new streaming services, there isn't one show that says politicians suck. They're all like, no, they're bravo. I mean, we have problems with Trump, but overall, they're all wonderful, decent, principled. They're all having kabuki feet or fake conversations about the ideas of politicians, right?
Yep.
That's stunning. All right, last two things. Here's another prediction.
Let me add one thing before I forget, because
Yeah.
Brett wrote in, and since you had mentioned Mike from Central Committee will be on TYT May 28th. So.
All right, excellent.
Yeah.
So look, I think that Haas will soon get an offer from one of these folks because they've got to pull their head out of their ass at some point. Some decade they've got to pull their head out of their ass. Now Haas is almost getting old, right? He's like 29, right?
Wow.
He used to be a kid when he came here. And so they'll make him an offer, my guess, and then they'll come in and they'll say, okay, now here's all the things you can't do. And then Haas will go, fuck off, okay?
Yep.
Because they can't help themselves. Mainstream media is always like, but don't just fake being a populist, don't actually be one, because all of us are still in power and really wealthy, okay? Yep. And then super last thing is, since you halfway threw me under a bus, I'll put myself on top of a bus as saying that does not exist. Okay. I've never talked about this either. So Haas started here in sales, and he was actually really good at it. And anyway, I don't want to get into it, but like he was enterprising, showed initiative, and got a decent amount of sales. And I remember the day that I moved him from sales to being on air, and he was super mad at me. Okay, because he made a little bit more money on sales, and he thought I was, whatever, disrespecting him or whatever it was.
He thought he wanted to live like a capitalist every single day, Cenk, but he was wrong.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't. To be fair to Haas, I'm not sure that was it, right? But I said, Haas, one day you'll thank me, okay? Because you're better on air, and I believe in you, and I think you're going to be great on air, right? And I mean, I'm not saying I was right, except I was definitely right.
Yeah, you were right, for sure.
Okay, so I mean, imagine if he was still in sales. First of all, it would have never happened. He wouldn't have stayed, right? But it would have been a total waste. So I'm proud that at this company, we unleash people. We empower people and then unleash them. And so whether they're here or they've left, and sometimes they go sideways, okay, but we're in the empowering business. And so that makes us very different than the rest of media. All right, much love. Big Rick Energy?
Big Rick Energy coming up on our
it's coming
Twitch
up right
channel.
now. I mean, you guys gather up all your energy. You won't be able to match Rick's, but still, bring in all that energy. Go to twitch.tv/TYT. Rick does a great show, and go watch. And I remember why I'm hesitating one more second. I'm back on Tuesdays, okay? So I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'll be on the show as well. All right, see you then.